I just heard some wheel spin out the back. Do you want to go open the garage for him, Jazz? If
Odell?
I'm waiting outside the garage.
Okay. All right. See you in a sec. Jez's going to come down and get you.
Okay.
Yeah. No doubt. Fucking finally here. Is this the latest anyone's ever been?
I mean, I don't think anyone's even been late before.
Everyone's always on time.
People are chronically early.
This is like right next to the fucking park.
7 minutes.
You're finally here.
I drove 20 minutes away from the park and then 20 minutes right back. We're right next to the park.
All right, I'm going to confess. We're recording. We just set the recording waiting for you.
Am I just entering?
Yeah, everyone's going to know you're late.
Do you want an apple?
I don't want to eat on here though. Well, I'll just try.
We
No one will
can
mind.
slice you an apple.
Oh, you want to slice me?
Do you want a sliced apple and a little bit of peanut butter to dip it in?
I don't do peanut butter.
This is all part of the show.
That's awesome. I'll do that in a second.
All right. Have you changed hats? Oh, no, you haven't. Late Dell or no Dell? No Dell,
no
Odell.
Did you tell them why I'm late?
Yeah, it's your mistake. It's your fault. You didn't say, Pete, what's the address so I can come to the interview? Hi, Matthew.
I asked Peter his address,
That was the mistake.
and he said Westfield Drive. It's an accurate address. It was like 25 minutes away outside of Nashville. And right when he had told me the address, I said, damn, why'd you decide to stay at a place so far away? And you said it was bigger and better for shooting.
Okay.
And then I said, yeah, the other place is a way better location.
Okay, so
Then I proceeded to drive 20 minutes out there, only to drive 20 minutes back to here because this is like a couple blocks away from Bitcoin Park where I had just recorded Citadel Dispatch and then was driving to you.
I'm going to put this out as a poll and check. It's Saturday today. We get here on Wednesday, and I get a text from you saying, looking forward to kick it, brother. Where's your house at? I'm like, oh. I mean, I just got here. I'm like, oh, I'm on Westfield Drive. Didn't realize it's Westwood Drive. Like, just made a simple mistake.
Personal responsibility, Peter.
Well, you should have. Danny sent you an invite.
That is true.
That is true.
That is true.
I wouldn't have been so casual if I'd have known you were using this as your
I
directions.
literally asked you what your address was.
Yeah, I just thought, like, where are you in the city?
Okay, well, it's fine. I'm glad I made it. Thank you again for having me.
You're 41 minutes late.
Our yearly... It was literally the drive both ways.
Like, I feel bad now.
You should feel a little bit bad.
It's our annual show that people think we weren't going to make. You're not allowed to fuck around with the microphone all interview.
Everyone said I do it too much. I don't have
Yeah.
any formal podcast training.
So don't fuck around with the microphone.
Anything else?
All interview, you're like this. What?
Yeah, but you couldn't hear it on the... It was just pissing people off on the video feed.
Yeah, it's the video people. Fuck the video people anyway. We don't make money off them. Danny, tell Matthew about Derek.
Have you heard about my fam?
Yeah, Danny's
No,
got
I
a
am
camera.
now.
You have a camera now?
That
Yeah.
cut out when I was telling you about Derek S as well. The recording, the audio.
Did it?
So Derek S will never know what we said about him.
Poor Derek.
Oh, wow.
I think we know Derek, and I just want to know who it is.
I don't know.
Yeah, he must love the fact that he's getting like his moment in the show.
Shout out to Derek.
What's up, Derek? Yeah. So people who don't know, me and Matt here normally make a. Look, I'm fucking playing with it.
Don't play with it, bro.
We normally make a show every Christmas.
I like playing with it. Continue.
a year of review, and talk about next year and get drunk. Normally, we normally get wasted.
Yeah, we've gotten pretty drunk pretty much every one, right?
One, we got so drunk that we just yelled at each other.
That was the best. Oh no, that one was the year before that was my favorite, I think.
Is that,
I
The
had to
one we
edit
did
the
at
one
my
where-
apartment. The one we did at my apartment was the best one.
Yeah, that was good. I had to edit the one where you both got really drunk on Zoom, and that was not the best
That
one.
one was so bad.
yeah, I don't remember finishing that show.
That was like I don't know. It was a bit of a Thanksgiving Day table argument. Oh, you don't have Thanksgiving?
bring it
Like
out in
Christmas
front of you.
dinner.
Yeah, it's Christmas without presents.
Yeah, that's what that one was, though.
Yeah.
It was like two, like me and my uncle getting into a drunken argument.
Because we weren't together. The remote ones don't work.
Yeah.
These work. You your Citadel Dispatch ones you do in person, right? If you
Citadel
can.
Dispatch.
Yeah, you do those in person, don't you?
I try my best. Like we just recorded one in person at Bitcoin Park.
But they're better, right? You get it. They're better in person.
It's always better. I mean, it's a little bit. These lights are really bright.
Yeah.
We have a more laid back approach at Citadel Dispatch. There's no video, no lights. You
Yeah.
know, I can relax with the people.
Do you want the light off?
Thank you. No, I mean you can leave it on if you. I know it's best for your video, but it takes you out of it a little bit. You know.
People get a bit nervous in the environment.
I mean, I've never. Well, until last year, I never had this many cameras just pointed at me.
Yeah, well, you have now. We're doing this without drink for the first time ever.
Oh yeah, so you're sober now. Is that just a January thing, or is that a?
I'm not sure. Definitely January, and then just see what happens. I'm not it's not that I'm feeling like I'm not like an alcoholic, but when we do these journeys, I drink on the plane, and then there's a reason to drink every day. There's like a dinner or a
Right.
thing, so you end up for like 15 days drinking in a row, and I'm just like, I can't keep doing that. I'm 44, so I was like, I'm going to do
It
January.
catches up to you, yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing is like bear market year, so it's like this is going to be a hard year. Got to work hard.
Not just a bear market; it's also a recession.
Well, yeah, it's
Potentially
recession,
a global depression.
global depression,
Thank you,
getting
sir.
old, and just feeling like I've got to work hard. I just need a bit more focus. So it's like, okay, I've spent the last 4 years getting fat and drinking. Now I'm gonna like reverse course, drink
That's
a bit
good.
less. Yeah, so I'm not gonna do January. That's why we're not having 7 bottles of whiskey now. You
Yeah.
can have your liquid death
I have my water.
and your apple.
But anyway, that's great.
Yeah.
You got to take care of your body. You only have one.
Yeah. I'm too old though. I mean, you're just a young pup.
Starting to feel the age as well.
Mate, you got some time to go. Anyway, good to see you, man. How has your 2023 been? All 7 days.
2023. Oh yeah. I mean, we're supposed to be talking about 2022, but 2023 has been a good year.
Yeah, Bitcoin's up.
It's already Bitcoin's up. This is, I mean, Bitcoin's in an interesting place. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but it's an interesting year. It's been good. We're doing great things at Bitcoin Park. You were there earlier today. The community is vibrant. It's strong, which is amazing in a bear market and a recession. But it's an optimistic year, but it's also a bit of an anxious year, and we'll see what happens.
I mean, I think everyone's feels like that. There's a lot to be anxious about because it was a rough last 6 months of this year, and there's going to be less money circulating because of that. And like you say, it's a recession. There's a cost of living crisis. You're going to have to work hard for your dollars, your pounds, your sats. But that's it was the same in 2019. You just have to grind and work
When the
through
bear
it.
market?
The fact that the mentality is okay, got to grind and work hard.
Well, what people don't realize, and I'll preface this with saying, I'm pretty much all in Bitcoin. If anything, it goes past all in because I've dedicated my life to Bitcoin education. So that would be pretty horrible if Bitcoin failed. So I think people do not realize that usually in these bear markets, we're about to enter the period where essentially this becomes a long, slow grind. There's no quick recovery that happens. And you just, you stick in there. And that's why I just keep repeating, stay humble, stack sats, right? Because you just keep one foot in front of the next and you just keep pushing forward. They tend to be very long. People tend in the beginning to, say, oh, this is not bad, but it's that long, boring grind down that really hurts. and a lot of people burn out during that period. Now, this is the first time Bitcoin was born out of the last Great Recession, right? 2008. It was born right after that. So this is the first time Bitcoin's been in existence in the largest macro bull run in human history. Like, we've never had that kind of situation before, and Bitcoin's existed through that whole period. Now it seems like we're going to start to pay the consequences of the cheap money that led that bull run the whole time. And it's yet to be seen how Bitcoin reacts in that environment. Now, I think Bitcoin's the ideal safe haven. I think it's born for this environment. If we see bank runs, which we probably will see, if we see more global trade issues in terms of trust, right? Already see Russia, you already see China trying to do trade outside of the dollar system. These types of things is what Bitcoin was born for, right? And this is why I think Bitcoin has value in the first place. But in the meantime, we're seeing cheap money policies, over 2 decades of cheap money policies, get reversed. And all that money's drying up. People are losing their jobs outside of Bitcoin. People are going to start spending less. It seems like most people, and we kind of saw this with the COVID situation, where it seemed kind of obvious that COVID was going to sweep the world in early 2020, but anyone who was saying so was called crazy, and you kind of just thought to yourself, well, how come not everyone else is freaking out about it? And then we slow rolled into people freaking out about it. It took months for people to freak out about it. I don't think this idea of the recession, the actual recession, maybe a depression, has really hit people yet. And so we haven't really seen the consequences of that yet by any means. So I think we could be completely blown off guard by how this year plays out. And hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully we don't enter, we don't continue a recession. If we're already in a recession, we don't enter a depression, we recover, Bitcoin, adoption goes crazy and everyone wins. But there's a very good chance, in my opinion, that this is a longer drawn out kind of situation than we're used to in previous Bitcoin bear markets.
Do you know what I think happens?
What?
Just the same 4-year pattern.
Just 4-year pattern.
I just think the same thing's going to happen again.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so we usually review the previous year. We can go month by month. We can go topic by topic. There's a lot to go through. I was optimistic at the start of the year. Price was good. Companies were raising money. Cool shit was being built. Downloads were good. We were traveling and making good shows. Everything felt good. Felt like a good start to the year. Did you feel that?
Yeah, definitely. On downloads, have you already seen? You've already seen activity across everything drop today.
Yes and no. Have you got our download chart?
Yep.
We can show you our downloads. It's we don't hide anything. It's we did, and then it came back. But what we tend to find is in a bull market, we will 5x whatever, and then during a bear market, we maybe lose 20-25%. But our downloads look like a Bitcoin chart normally.
Yeah, that's what I see too.
Yeah.
You could already feel that activity's down significantly on Twitter and
but
mempools.
But we're seeing a recovery in downloads, which is kind of interesting. Have you got it, Danny?
Yeah.
Yeah, I show you this.
Does it come up here?
Yeah.
Should do.
No, if you go
do year in review, right?
Go almost 20. Yeah, but if you almost go 2020, so you have context. Even 2019, go January 2019. And then if you do it by month, so you can see the run up, right?
Right, the last month doesn't count because it's just not added.
Yeah. And then, so what was that 2022 spike, Danny? So that was March 2022 when the price first ran up, and then it dropped, but then it came back up. It didn't for our downloads, but you can see, right? So that they're the two you see those two spikes, yeah?
Yeah.
And then obviously after that second spike, it drops. And so we went from, this is just audio, but what was that, 1.1 million? 1.056, and then we've gone down to 775, right? So that's
Right.
about a 25% drop. But then we started to see a recovery. I mean, like December was shit, but expected because of the holiday period.
Right, it
drops,
usually is.
But you know, we had our third biggest month ever in
Well,
November.
no, November. But you know what happened in November? I mean, we'll get to it in the year review, but that's when SBF went down.
Yeah, and we had some content around that. But we also had the other thing is like we were traveling. We were in LA.
But that was like that's like a classic. Like Twitter was banging
yeah.
in November, right? And then now it's become more of a ghost town. This is like classic bear market situation, right? Now it's going to grind. The activity is going to grind down probably for a bit.
Yeah, I think we know the content people want for us to go sideways, like to maintain that like over.
Okay, well, hopefully you can overcome that. But the point is that we always see in bear markets, we see Bitcoin activity go down across the board.
Yeah.
And this time will be no different, right? In that regard. And like right now we're kind of in the lull, and then it's just gonna lull for a bit.
Yeah, like, and is it a year? Is it 2 years?
Like only the ride or dies like stay around during this period. And those people, you know, there's a meme, bear markets are for building.
Yeah.
But what the meme, and every meme is based in reality, as including that one. But what the meme doesn't tell you is that most people get burnt out or wrecked during that bear cycle. The builders that build during the bear market and then emerge the other side, there's a survivorship bias because those are the only ones we see. They're usually very successful. But the truth of the matter is the majority of building gets just absolutely destroyed during that period.
It's also like the other meme, the bear markets are for surviving.
Yeah.
It's survival.
Just straight survival.
Yeah, and we interviewed Danny Scott from Coin Corner recently. Do you know Danny?
Yeah. Danny's great.
Danny's great. And it was a really interesting conversation. You can compare it to some of the companies who've raised lots of capital. They haven't raised any capital really. And they've just gone for the slow grind or build up. And in doing so, you know, when you see in other companies laying off a third of their staff I mean, he didn't really talk about laying off staff. And
I think they've grown, if anything.
Yeah, and they've just, during the bull market, they've built out products.
Right.
And, you know, they've built a company that, you know, they'll have to grind the year out, but they've not grown so quickly that they've got to like cut back a huge amount. And we were similar. Yeah, where companies have really leveraged the bull market and wrecked themselves, you know, we've just conserved capital. The money we've made, we put in the bank, and that's going to be what we use to survive this year. We'll have some income. We'll diversify what we do. But, you know, I think not enough companies prepared like that. It was Ledger. I learned the story about Ledger, what they did back in 2017, where everything went crazy, like how they would prepare for the next kind of bull bear cycle. And the main impact on them was actually logistics. It's like, how do you build a company that suddenly has to have a massive amount of supply of inventory, massive amount of customer service that they only need for a short period every 4 years?
The key is you have to be able to scale during the bull in a responsible way that you can scale back down.
But it's also like managing your cash flow.
Yeah, managing risk management.
I just think some people, every time it comes to a bull market, they think there's not going to be another bear market this time. This time
we've
it's
heard
different.
so much of that, the super cycle.
Yeah. I talked about that on this
It
show.
always, yeah.
Yeah, I think the super cycle was slightly different. It was going to be like just a much bigger bull cycle. Not that you wouldn't get to a bear cycle, but I kind of wish this whole bull bear thing would end. I know it's not going to, because it's human psychology, right? Yeah. But I kind of wish it would.
Well, it should, as adoption increases, it should, the volatility of it should decrease. It should stabilize as more people use it, as there's more adoption, as there's greater liquidity in the market. We'll still see, because it's an actual free market, we'll still see, you know, hills and valleys. Like there'll still be pumps and dumps, but the severity should reduce in the scale of them.
All right.
Like percentage wise, right?
Yeah.
That's my thought process when I think about it. But it's just in an adoption phase, of course, you know, a ton of people are going to buy. It's a truly scarce asset. sellers all evaporate because the price is pumping. People get greedy. Then it gets over leveraged. Then it dumps. All the weekends are washed out, and then the cycle just kind of repeats itself.
I think at the moment, one of the things I've got like a gut feel for is that it's a bigger problem now for the companies than the Bitcoiners. I'm not feeling like, when I talk to Bitcoiners, like they're feeling stressed or worried or whatever. But like you can see a lot of companies are struggling. And I think one of the reasons that might be, I think we've got a lot more Bitcoiners who come in who don't work for Bitcoin companies. So they've got their jobs outside. Like when we were down at Bitcoin Park today, I met a bunch of people, they don't work for Bitcoin companies. So they're Bitcoiners, but like their company they work for might be affected by the recession, but it's not affected by the Bitcoin price. And I feel like when I'm surrounded by Bitcoiners themselves, they're still like fairly positive. Companies is a different story. There's not a lot of capital and there's not a lot of activity.
Yeah, I mean, so I was a strong supporter of, and I've always been a strong supporter of people. People say like, "Oh, I want to do something to help Bitcoin," right? And I'm like, "Well, what do you do for a living?" And they're like, "I'm a doctor." I was like, "Okay, just be a doctor that accepts Bitcoin. Just keep being a doctor. Like that's what you are. Stack sats, earn sats. Learn how to use your own node, hold your own keys." Like that makes complete sense. And during bear cycles, it's fantastic because your source of income is completely independent of Bitcoin. I think we've seen a different phenomenon as well, which is, first of all, we've seen the emergence of this almost like Bitcoin-only industry, right? There was early Bitcoin companies. They mostly went to shitcoinery. Then there was a lot of shitcoin companies that got birthed. And then there was like this pushback to the fundamentals and to the basics. And there's all these brand new, relatively new Bitcoin companies. And they're staffed mostly by ideological Bitcoiners, where people were actually deciding they wanted to work in Bitcoin. And we've never seen this many people kind of work in Bitcoin, right? That's almost the change. So we have all these new Bitcoin companies. We have all these new Bitcoiners working at these companies. And I will say this is the first bear cycle that I've ever had friends laid off, lose their jobs, right? And I think it's a combination of those two phenomenon. And it definitely makes it more difficult from a personal level when you have that kind of situation.
Yep.
But I would say because we're in a recession, this will also be it'll be the first cycle where there's mass layoffs outside of Bitcoin too. So it doesn't necessarily insulate you from that. I will say that from my experience at 1031, which we're Bitcoin only venture fund, which by the way, is a relatively new concept as well, right? Usually you have the A16Zs of the world, the Sequoias of the world, the multi-coin capitals, Paradigm, and they're just investing in WorldCoin and all of these dystopian shit coins and token schemes so they can dump on retail. This idea of a Bitcoin-only venture fund is that the Bitcoin companies that we support and also the greater Bitcoin industry as a whole, it has been way, way, way more prudent about risk management and building their businesses on solid foundations than the greater quote unquote crypto ecosystem. Like there's a lot of strength out there, even though we're in this kind of unknown situation in terms of capital markets. And a perfect example of that is the issues we're seeing happening with Digital Currency Group right now, which is this massive titan that's existed in the Bitcoin industry and the shitcoin industry for a long time, is that every other bear cycle, they had access to cheap capital to bail themselves out, whether that's borrowing and raising equity. This is the first cycle that's not the case. So at 1031, we're going to still, operate in this environment, and we plan to operate in this environment as much as we possibly can in terms of getting funding to Bitcoin companies. But we've also been talking to them a lot about making sure that their business is in, and we've been talking about this with them for almost the whole year now, is making sure your business is in a situation where if you can't get any external capital, if you're in a situation where you can't get any external capital, you can survive a 3-year bear market and ideally thrive in that situation, right? And the overwhelming majority of the companies that we talk to are in the Bitcoin industry are able to do that because they didn't play high time preference games. They didn't play these, get rich quick games. They played these low time preference, long-term thinking games. And as a result, they're sitting in relatively solid footing entering a potential global depression and a Bitcoin bear market. and they're able to build in that environment to ideally take advantage of the next bull.
Yeah, and that kind of list of companies that have gone through a rough, say 6 to 8 months, I can't think of a single Bitcoin company that's blown up, created news because they've blown up because they've over leveraged themselves.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, look, I think if it happens, it'll be more like these companies. If it's a Bitcoin company, they might run out of runway and they might just
Right.
burn out, and it ends. But they'll run out of runway because there's just not enough activity in the market. And hopefully, when they do, like it just be a case of some people lose their jobs and then technology goes. But it's not a situation where they fucked a whole bunch of other people, which is obviously what we've seen with other companies. The collateral damage that's been done to other companies, individuals, Bitcoiners, even crypto people, like this collateral damage from poor decision making. I feel like, at least with these Bitcoin companies, if something ends for them, there's not like this collateral damage. I can't think of a single company.
But I mean, I don't think Bitcoin only doesn't necessarily make you immune to that.
No, but just don't think it's happened.
It could basically, where you see the real bad collateral damage is when you have custodial accounts. And most custodial accounts tend to be exchanges which tend to support every shitcoin under the sun, right? But the same risk is maintained with any business that operates on a custodial relationship.
No, of course, but like if something like a River failed, I don't believe when River fails, it's like, oh, by the way, we've lost all your funds. I believe a company like River.
Well, that just speaks to the integrity of Alex and his team.
Yeah.
It's not because they're Bitcoin only, though.
No, but I think there is like a correlation between Bitcoin only and the principles of which you operate the business and the risks you take. I think there's a correlation there.
I would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
This is part of our thesis in
Yeah.
the first place. It's part of why I've, dedicated my life to Bitcoin education.
Yeah, and one of the tricky things I think for these companies is also like there hasn't been a massive build out of regular and consistent usage of Bitcoin that some of these companies may rely on as well. Maybe they're a payment processing company and there just isn't enough people constantly spending, or there isn't enough money yet being made off Lightning transactions. So, some of these companies are kind of waiting for the market to come to them, and they're going to have some patience and some resiliency to get through.
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the biggest issue is twofold that I've seen from my experience is, first of all, we're all Bitcoiners. If you're running a Bitcoin-only business, you're an ideological Bitcoiner because every VC, all the crypto VCs, all the regular VCs or whatever, any advisor, they'll all tell you just add all the different coins. Oh, you don't have Ethereum on it? Like, you have to do it, right? So the only people that don't do it are usually ideological Bitcoiners. And what is one consistent thing with most ideological Bitcoiners is that we tend to keep a large portion, if not our entire net worth, in Bitcoin. And the same goes true with the Bitcoin companies, right? A lot of Bitcoin companies, and it makes sense to me because it's the same way with the companies that I run, is that they're a method for stacking sats, right? Like, you want to stack Bitcoin, and that company ends up holding more and more of their Bitcoin on their balance sheet, right? So the question is what is their portfolio management? Are they all in Bitcoin in their reserves? And does that mean their reserves are down 80%? And that is coupled with this idea that a lot of companies were built off the back of this idea that you could always raise money. It was just a question of valuation or interest rate, right?
Yeah.
And that just doesn't exist right now. Even Coinbase is having trouble raising, borrowing money.
I know somebody who's not having trouble.
And Coinbase is having trouble borrowing money, and they're multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, right? So any company that was built off the back of this idea that we don't have to be profitable yet, we could be profitable in the future, this like idea of growth at all costs that's fueled by cheap money, those companies are in trouble. It just tends to be that most of those types of companies aren't Bitcoin companies, and I think there is a correlation there. There's this idea, this like low time preference kind of long-term building, building real businesses with fundamental value kind of mindset.
Well, if you refer back to Coin Corner and Danny Scott, I'm sure like in the last 2 years, if they wanted to raise money, they could have, and their valuation could have gone up. and they could have hired a bunch of people. And then they could have maybe avoided shitcoins, but like maybe the pressure would have got to them. It's like, shit, we've raised this money. We've got to hit this milestone because we need to raise our next round. Because I think one of the problems I have no issue with people raising money, but one of the pressures that come with raising money is like, they want you to deploy that capital quickly. So you raise your next round.
Right.
And then deploy that. And so you raise your next round because they know in each round the valuation goes up. And at some point you hope, or they hope, that you're going to either sell or you're going to IPO. I mean, I think
they're both sales, exit liquidity.
Yeah, and that I mean that
Getting
I think
out.
that's the classic problem that happened with BlockFi, which I'm sure we're going to get into. Whereas something like Coin Corner, they're like, well, we've got this much money in the bank, we're bringing this much money in. This is what it costs to run us. Okay, how long can we operate? What are our risks? No one can tell us what to do. You know, we haven't got somebody with a seat on our board pressuring us, telling us to raise more capital. They've just, Danny and that team have said, what is the cool technology we should build? How do we stay independent? How do we grow our company? And they're just doing it. They're just doing it on their
It's a
timeline.
good old fashioned cash flow positive business.
Yeah, and that's
It's amazing how novel that is nowadays.
yeah. But it's look, there is also that you need to consider coming into a bear market. It's like, yeah, cash flow positive business, but cash flow can get hit hard during a year like this year. Have you got reserve capital, or what happens when things get
Right.
difficult? Like, it's a situation we're facing with this podcast. Like, there isn't as much sponsorship money available. What do we do? Like, what do we do over the next year? How do we carry on doing what we're doing? Like, how do we finance it? Now, we've conserved capital from the last year, but like, there's still things we have to think about. We have to rethink our strategy for the next year. Like, I think that's a lot of people are going through, and be interesting to see how it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're fortunate that there are a lot of Bitcoin businesses that were built with that mindset.
Bring that in a bit, just so I can hear you.
I don't want to touch it though.
You can touch it to bring it in. When it's here, you sound different from when it's here.
Okay.
You don't have to lean in. You can just bring it to you.
I've done thousands of hours of podcasting,
Yeah.
but thanks for the.
Just make sure the mic's in front of your mouth. I mean, it's.
But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of Bitcoin businesses that have done that, and it's good for everybody involved.
Do you want to talk about Bitcoin Park before we get into this stuff? Because I feel like what you guys are doing there's cool, and I'd rather people hear about that as early as possible, and also like you get that tail off of listeners during the show.
What do you think about Bitcoin Park?
I think it's bold. I think I wish I had something like that in Bedford, but there isn't a market for it. I think it's cool coming into Nashville knowing that exists, and there's I think you've created something where a community can build around it, which is very cool. I think there'll be something like a Bitcoin Park in every state and every major city, whether that's you guys franchising it eventually or other people just going, that's fucking cool, we're going to do it. But either way, I see
Hopefully
it
the
coming.
latter,
Yeah.
to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we've managed in Bedford once a month to have a meetup at 50 to 60 people come, which is, for me, is incredible.
Yeah, that's really good.
In like fucking Bedford. But there's no way we could build a Bitcoin Park yet. But eventually, I just like this idea of things being built up around meetups and communities now.
Physical spaces.
Yeah.
So I would say Bitcoin Park is me and Rod's Real Bedford.
Yes.
It might be crazy enough that it just works, right?
Yeah.
It was a bold plan, and it's this idea of having a proper center for the community, a campus for the community in Nashville, focused on empowering the local community around us and also Bitcoin. We have members, we do events, we have an event space, we have multiple podcasting studios, we have private offices, we have co-working space, we have a little coffee shop. That's where our meetups are held. We do 2 meetups a month right now, hopefully expanding that. We have this big mining event coming up. So we have this idea of you have these topical meetups every month, and that topic is the same every year. So you can plan around that. Like, these are the topics that I enjoy. And then for some of the main topics, like mining, we will have a summit that follows that meetup that's open to the public. So you have like you have a full week of basically discussions and collaborations. Then we take a lot of those live conversations and we strip them of the Q&A, because we always do Q&A at all of our events. I think Q&A is extremely empowering. And we strip them of the Q&A, and then we post them to the Bitcoin Park podcast feed. So you can just search Bitcoin Park in your favorite podcast app and listen to those conversations. But it's been amazing to build it. It's been about 6 months now in a bear market and a recession. Our community here is extremely vibrant. It's growing. It's stronger. We see people. I just recorded a dispatch with a lovely couple that often come down from Louisville. They drive
with the dog.
That was a different couple that came
okay.
down from Detroit with their dog.
Yeah.
And they make the drive from Louisville 3 hours to come to Bitcoin Park, pretty much monthly. So it's just this great space where, we're all like collaborating and meeting each other and shaking each other's hands and seeing each other in person. And it's been extremely empowering. And you mentioned earlier, like it would be great to see Bitcoin Parks in all these different cities around the world. And one thing that I noticed was during COVID, and the response to COVID during the lockdowns, we were encouraged not to be in physical spaces together. But the Bitcoin meetup scene around the world, this grassroots Bitcoin scene around the world, was growing and growing and growing. And it completely bucked the trend. Instead, meetups were growing bigger than ever. You had 60 people in Bedford.
Yeah.
We were seeing in Nashville, we were going up. It was like 100 people, then 150 people, then 200 people. And this grassroots Bitcoin adoption was just accelerating, just people, neighbors helping neighbors. So in September, the first event we held at Bitcoin Park, we called Grassroots Bitcoin, and that's an annual event. And we had over 100 meetup organizers came to Bitcoin Park, completely free of charge. We collaborated, we had conversations, we discussed, we just had fun, drinks, food. And then they all went back to their cities and to their meetups, right? And the cool part about all of this is that it's truly grassroots, that it really embodies the ethos of Bitcoin, this idea that it's not centrally controlled. There's all these different local communities that are slightly different, and they have different priorities, and they're built a little bit different way. But at the same time, we're all kind of connected on this same mission to have just an independent money that is not corporate or state controlled, and also just this greater free and open source movement. We had Seed Signer, the two men who are the maintainers of Seed Signer, came down to Bitcoin Park. And we had people as young as 13, as old as 55, building their own hardware wallets.
As old as 55. Fuck, man. That's
pretty cool.
That's like 11 years for me.
What'd you say, 42? As old as 42, 44.
I think you missed a part of it as well. In what I've noticed with going to some of these meetups now is the amount of conversation that isn't about Bitcoin.
Yes.
Which I think is really important in this, become this kind of like all these asymmetric topics. My first one I went, it was Texas Slim talking about the beef initiative.
Yeah, so we just had the beef initiative there, which is all about supporting local farmers, understanding where your food comes, eating better food. All these tangential but important topics about empowering individuals and empowering communities. That's kind of the glue that holds it all together.
I mean, one conversation I had today there was with a guy about homeschooling. I think there's...
Yeah, that's what we just did the dispatch on.
Oh, is that couple?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were
Were
great.
they the ones
Natalia
making
and
the board
Scott.
game?
The best board game I've ever played.
They said they're going to take it to the
Best
conference.
Bitcoin board game I've ever played.
What's it called? Like Hodl Up? or something?
Hodl Up, freemarketkids.com. There.
Yeah, I
Let's
love
give them
it.
a shill.
Is it available?
I don't
Yes,
know.
it is. You can pay for Bitcoin or in credit card. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I've played a lot of Bitcoin games that people have asked me for feedback for. This one is a fantastic game. It's a really good game.
All right, we'll check that out.
Without the Bitcoin component, but it's still, even with the Bitcoin component, it adds this whole educational element, which is great. And also, I just did an episode with them on Citadel Dispatch, so
Okay.
check it out.
But where I'm going with this, and I think the great thing about Bitcoin Park, and the thing that will take it, make it even more successful, or help it with its growth, is that I don't think you have to be somebody who cares about Bitcoin as money to come there and get some value from it. You might come there for a beef initiative event with Texas Slim, or you might come there for another thing and then learn about Bitcoin and get into it. But for me, it's so much better that we turn up at these events and we're not just talking about 21 million and UTXOs. We're talking about other subjects. It's becoming there's like this whole group of other subjects just outside of Bitcoin. And I think that is important for it to grow. And I know that's one of the things I've got out of it, especially today, like down at yours.
No, yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I would love to have all these different types of events. And one of the things we're trying to do is it's a member-supported initiative.
Yeah.
Right? So we have this idea of 100 in-state members that pay annual dues and then 100 out-of-state members that pay annual dues. And together we all can cover the cost of it because it's an expensive endeavor. Part of that concept is empowering the individual members to have their own events there, right? Where they have the support of Bitcoin Park, but they handle the programming themselves, right? It goes up on the meetup page, everything like that, but they own it, right? So I could see Scott and Tali, I could see them doing, right now we're already planning on doing game nights, right? But I could see them doing homeschooling things there, right? And this idea is that from there it can expand kind of organically of all the different topics and conversations that's happening. And amid those members, they're not just all these like stereotypical ideological Bitcoiners, right? It's lawyers and real estate brokers and just people of all different walks of life. And some of them are just like Bitcoin curious. But if they spend enough time there, I have a feeling that they're going to end up loving Bitcoin.
Have you noticed people coming in who aren't really Bitcoiners, who are kind of intrigued by what's going on? Have you managed to tap into like the non-Bitcoin local?
Yeah, we get a lot of a physical location's powerful, right?
Yeah.
That people can just walk in and talk to people and just have conversations is just extremely empowering. I don't think people it can't be overstated how important that physical aspect is. And that's why I would love to see. I mean, I joke around all the time that like, the ideal situation is not that I'm building Bitcoin Park. The ideal situation would be someone else was building Bitcoin Park and I could just go to Bitcoin Park, right? Like I want as many of these physical spaces as possible all around the world, so that no matter where you are, you can go there, you can work, you can collaborate, you can just have a good time. Like that'd be great.
Yeah. I mean, I obviously want to do something similar in Bedford, but based around football.
Yeah.
Like I want to build a ground with training pitches and a gym, and people
That's
can come
awesome.
in there and look after their fitness, and kids can come train, and you know, our ladies team can come and train. We'd love to have like a disability team, but it's all based around football for me. But in doing so, we have our Bitcoin events, and people can come and learn about Bitcoin or learn about diet. Like it is, I think it in some ways it is similar to what you're doing. It's similar to Bitcoin Beach, but like having these different edges that like relate to the person running it, I think that's what makes the difference. But okay, so like where do you want people to this is meant to be the end of the show, but we'll do it now. Where do you want people to go? How can people help support it?
BitcoinPark.co if you want more information. You can support us with Bitcoin there if you want to donate. You can apply to become a member there. If you want to support us annually and get all the member benefits that come with it. You search Bitcoin Park in your favorite podcast app. A lot of our content gets posted there after events. And then just come check it out. Just come down to Nashville and have a good time.
Nashville's fucking great, man. Yeah. I like it here. I think if we were to ever base ourselves in one place, this is up there.
There you go. Well, it sounds like you're gonna use this as one of your bases of operation in the US, right?
I think we're most. I mean, it's become New York, Nashville, Austin, Miami, LA, but the two places that we can go to regularly, know we get the right people. The other thing, interesting thing, is people want to come in. So like if we go to New York, we'll get a few people, maybe get some people in. But like if we go to Nashville, they can make a whole thing about it. They can fly in, they can do the show, they can come to Bitcoin Park. There might be a meetup on. Like there's more of a reason in Nashville, same with Austin. And so those locations we do might become smaller. Like I don't know about you, Danny, I could see New York dropping off for us.
Yeah, LA too. But the best thing about, one of the good things about Nashville is it's not a very far flight from anywhere. So if you are flying in, it's pretty easy no matter where you are.
Yeah, centrally located.
Yeah. It's Nashville and Austin really, isn't it?
Yeah, they're the main two. Miami really. Miami's pretty good.
Although that's getting less too.
You think?
Yeah, I think so. Or maybe we've just tapped that audience a lot.
Yeah. Also, it's a long way to like if you're coming from California, it's a long
Yeah.
way to fly. We're trying also like one of the things we've been trying to do is actually realize like actually we need to support the UK. Like we come here to make the show. We did our first sprint in the UK recently. Got people from Europe in.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just like okay, how do we build that up? How do we promote what people are doing there? Like Danny, Scott, and Molly from CoinCon have done so much. It's like, well, they've worked so hard, and we're off here supporting the Americans. That's wrong. Like, how do we help them and support them?
And people like Ben Ark as well.
Yeah, Ben Ark.
Oh,
Actually,
I love Ben. Ben's amazing.
and I actually
Grateful
think
for him.
Jim Duffy, who did the Bitcoin event up in Edinburgh, he's like starting to build some things. He's starting to do some things. Like they did a great job with that event for a first ever event. And it's like, okay, well, we should probably be supporting that a bit more. And if it means like twice a year, it's like 2 less journeys a year. We can, well, same for you. Still got to fly, but
It's even further for me.
yeah, that's like good for us. I mean, I can't travel like this for the rest of my life. It's too much, man.
Well, anyway, before we finish up the Bitcoin Park segment, I just wanted, for your listeners, February is open source. We're going to have open source week. So we have a great number of devs, awesome devs coming in for it, and just people that are curious about Bitcoin. So it'll be one of the better ones of the year if people are interested.
All right. We'll put that all in the show notes, and anything you need, you tell us, we'll help you.
Don't touch the mic.
Don't touch the mic. I went, don't touch the mic.
I've been pretty good about it.
It's because you're here. You're making me want to touch the mic. I didn't used to touch the mic till you touched the mic. All right, okay. 2002,
January. We're January 2022. Everything's going great. Vibes are high.
IMF urged El Salvador to drop Bitcoin.
Makes sense to
Yeah,
be
of course.
expected. No one really. Was that a big thing?
I mean, that's all that happened in January.
Okay, fair enough.
The interesting side of that is you probably don't listen to my show anymore, but I made a show with Alex Gladstein about the IMF and the World Bank. I don't know if you read his article.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, a fascinating explanation of how like Western nations have managed to support their economies and live these great lives
Right.
based on economic imperialism. I wasn't some fuckeries going on, but the way he spelled it out, how they would indebt these nations to steal their resources.
Right.
It kind
They're
of
basically loan sharks
loan sharks.
on a global scale
Yeah, it's a
to
good way of putting
entire
it.
nations.
Yeah, and so that it kind of makes sense when the IMF is
Yeah,
like,
of course. Like Bitcoin stands against everything
Yeah.
that the IMF is.
yeah,
It's like the most obvious. The crazy thing is that it took them, that this was what put it on their radar, right? And
Yeah.
it took them so long to say something.
yeah. Okay, big thing in February was the Canada truckers and the Bitcoin wallets. being
Everyone
sold.
forgot that already.
Yeah. I'm not sure, man. Like that comes up a lot with us. I mean, like yesterday, what's that guy, Vivek?
Yeah, Ramswamy.
Yeah, even he brought it
He
up.
brought it up?
Yeah, do you know him?
No.
He brought it up. Like it comes up a lot. We had BTC sessions on recently. We talked about the whole
Well,
thing.
of course. I mean, he was central to it.
But we weren't going to make that show. We were going to make a show with him about educating people on Bitcoin, and then we mentioned that, and then we made a whole show on it. I still get emails about it. I think a lot of people have forgotten, but I think a lot of important people haven't forgotten and are using that, and they were saying, just remember what happened there. Just remember what happened there. Like what happened to people who were trying to protest.
The Canadian trucker protest was a hard one for me because it, first of all, represented everything, all the reasons why Bitcoin needs to exist in the first place, why you need a freedom money, why you need a money that cannot be stopped, that cannot be seized. We saw a Western government be angry against its people that were protesting. They were doing peaceful protests, and they weaponized the financial system against them. They closed their bank accounts. They forced companies that were accepting dollar donations to seize the money and to close the fundraisers. They even went after people who donated to banks' accounts. So it was a massive wake-up call, I would say, to a large portion of society why Bitcoin is needed in the first place. We heard many, many times, this kind of thing happens in Venezuela or Iran or Russia or China. And everyone's like, oh, well, not in my country. It won't happen in my country, right? And for it to happen in Canada, adjacent to the United States, I think it was a massive wake-up call for people. Now, it hit me extra hard because it should be the moment that is ideal for Bitcoin, where Bitcoin really excels. This idea of people being able to raise money globally, secure it, spend it, and use it as necessary. And to be frank, it was a complete clusterfuck. There was a Bitcoin fundraiser that was raised. The government went after the known people that were using it. The Bitcoin address that was being used was reused, so it was very easy to track it on chain, privacy-wise. The Canadian government came out and said that no exchanges could interact with that Bitcoin. When it got distributed, every trucker that received Bitcoin was put on camera, so their identity was known. It was a bit of a mess. At the end of the day, the protests were, they were squashed. These people weren't able to use the Bitcoin to actually help them in their protests for the most part. And a terrific opportunity for Bitcoin to empower individuals was missed. And it hurt because that should be one of the easiest use cases for Bitcoin. This idea that if you are a protester, if you are a activist in a country and you want to raise funds, you should be able to easily do so in a private and secure fashion without having kind of heavy technical expertise. And in this case, some of the people involved were, diehard Bitcoiners that educate others, right? That know most of the best practices. And even they had difficulty doing it. So that was disappointing. I don't want to be a complete doomer on it. In the follow-up of that, we recorded a Citadel Dispatch was completely focused on how do you raise donations in that environment. And it's relatively accessible for people to do that. But that's not what happened, right? And it was just, for me, it was the moment. And you could go back. The crazy thing about Rabbit Hole Recap is it's like a time capsule because that's my weekly news show. We've done that every week for 4.5 years, me and Marty. And if you can go back to any week in time and kind of see how we were feeling at that time, right? And I was crushed. I was deflated. And on top of that, for a moment there, it seemed like the U.S. might jump in and be involved with it as well. And it kind of seemed like the moment where the state goes against Bitcoin very hard in America and Canada. And they didn't. But they came close. And it just felt like we were not prepared. The Bitcoin network would be fine. It's built to handle this kind of thing. It's extremely resistant to change by design. But individual Bitcoiners would have felt significant pain in that situation, I think.
What if the fundraising had have been successful, mistakes hadn't been made, the money had got to the protesters, they were able to use it, and it lengthened the protest to the point where Bitcoin was so on the radar of the Trudeau government that they actually went fully against Bitcoin and banned it? Are we ready? Are we ready yet for that scenario?
Like I said, I think the Bitcoin network is.
Yeah,
I think the vulnerability is on individual Bitcoiners in a type of ban situation.
Because sometimes I think maybe you need a people revolution first, and I think we're kind of heading towards that. Was a people revolution. We're seeing serious threats to the Trudeau government. What's that guy's name? Polivier?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something
he's
like
he's a Bitcoiner. He's gaining ground. There's a good chance he might become the next prime minister. Maybe it needs to come from the people first, and Bitcoin just continues to grow in adoption and resilience.
But my point is not the specific Canadian situation. my point is this has already been happening around the world, and it was just very visible of the failure of Bitcoin to be very empowering in that situation. It was very visible to a lot more people than it was in other situations, right? So I do a lot of work helping activists use and raise Bitcoin in adversarial hostile environments. This concept of using Bitcoin in an environment where your government doesn't want you to use Bitcoin and doesn't want you to use the banking system, right? And the major vulnerability that those people have is on the privacy side. And it's because, so I was talking to Navalny's people, right? And Navalny is the major opposition leader to Putin. They've been completely cut out of the banking system, but they've been raising Bitcoin for years, but they reuse the same exact address. So every donation that goes to their address is connected on the blockchain, right? And I said to someone on their team, I said, if you want me to sit down with you for an hour, like I can show you how to do this. I was going to basically switch them to BTC Pay Server, which we go over in that Citadel Dispatch episode, which is why I recorded the Dispatch episode in addition to it. So I had somewhere to send people instead of saying, let's have an hour-long conversation. I was like, I can set it up for you so your donor's privacy is good or better, much better. And they said, no, it's unnecessary. We've been doing it this way for years. Putin can't stop it, right? Because he can't. He literally cannot block the transaction. Now, where does that privacy shortfall hurt? Putin goes to Binance, this is Navalny's address. Tell me everyone who gave you their ID, their KYC information, and sent money from Binance to this address. Binance just handed over all that information. So Putin now knows exactly who donated to his opposition candidate, and then he can go after them through all the different means at his disposal, whether it's throwing you in jail, work camp, closing your bank accounts, seizing your house, seizing your car. All of these different things are at his disposal, even though he can't seize your Bitcoin, not breaking your kneecaps, right? And can't block you from sending to Navalny. That privacy shortcoming, that privacy failure put real people at risk in hostile environments. And that happens all over the world almost every day, because Bitcoin is useful for those situations, but it's harder to use privately. And that's what happened in Canada, right? So all these people that donate, and a lot of people probably donated from Strike and Cash App and all this other stuff. And that's not even, very technical privacy, breaks, right? That's just, okay, this is the address for the donations. This is the address, who sent here. Let's hit if the US government wanted to go after it, they could have found out, probably the 60, 70% of the people who donated. But it just never went to that step. They just went for the people who received it and were managing the funds.
Yeah.
It's just really sad.
Yeah, but privacy is also another thing under attack. I mean, we saw that with the Tornado Cash dev get arrested. I think the privacy of Bitcoin is what governments fear the most. Not knowing. They just want to know everything. They want to scoop up every piece of information about you. Which is why I think, I've thought and discussed the idea that I think you win the war for the 21 million first, and then you win the war for privacy. I think they're the two major wars within Bitcoin. And what I mean by that is you win adoption through 21 million. You win adoption through good money first.
Right, scarce money.
Yeah, scarce money. Maybe the meme will be came for the game, stay for the privacy. And once Bitcoin is so ubiquitous that it can't be banned, stopped, everyone's using it, everyone appreciates it, or like a large majority, then it's hard to prevent people having privacy on it.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this at length the last time.
Did we?
It was literally all we talked about.
Did we go 21 million
Danny?
then privacy?
Yeah, that was pretty much the whole show.
People loved it. It was a great conversation. I enjoyed it. Now I'm holding the mic. But
we should have a...
they should just go back to that. What episode was that?
Do you know what we should have done?
We'll put it in the show notes.
If we'd have had the whiskey, we should have
just
said...
go back to that episode if you want to hear the privacy conversation.
Yeah,
Let's move on to the next...
the shot every time we touch the mic. That's what we should have done.
There
If we'd
you
have
go.
drinking, we'd have been fucked.
Yeah, I mean, now it's closer to home. I thought... I can't believe I drove 20 minutes out and 20 minutes back.
Well, that's because you fucking didn't answer you didn't use the diary entry.
I literally have receipts. Okay, I'm going to continue. What's
You
the
have
next
two
thing?
receipts. You just picked the wrong one.
What's the next thing?
I mean, the next thing is where we're probably going to jump around a bit because we can't really go month by month because we've got the Luna Foundation raising 1 billion, but really we're going to go from Luna to Luna crash to like everything crashing. So
Fucking Luna, man.
I know, but like to me, that was the first.
Did you get pie on your face on that one? Did you have podcasts where you were like, Luna's good for Bitcoin?
I've got receipts.
You have got receipts.
I've
I mean,
got
we
receipts.
don't, we don't do
shit's-
podcasts like that.
That shit stunk.
No.
Like people were really into it. They were like, this is great. You know, like it's Bitcoin buy pressure. He's buying Bitcoin. He's saying he's going to back his quote unquote stable coin with Bitcoin.
I've talked about
That got a lot of people.
I've talked about two things positively that aren't Bitcoin. I've talked about Monero, which I will stand by. And I've talked about the fact that it's very difficult to argue against the usefulness of stablecoins on platforms that we might not like, on Ethereum, on Tron, whatever, when there are people in countries using it because it's the best money they can get. It's very hard to argue.
Right, people want dollars.
Yeah, people want dollars and they're easy access to dollars. That's the only thing I've done. The only time I talked about Luna was I was on Pump Show and he asked me about it. And by the way, I'd barely heard of it. I'd seen people talking about it on Twitter, but because it's a shitcoin, I just don't pay attention to it.
Well, so like you had Luna, the shitcoin, and then Terra was the quote unquote stable coin pegged to the
Yeah.
dollar backed by Luna.
Yeah, whatever it was. Again, I've still not actually looked at it that much. And then he asked me about it, and I said it sounds like a scam. That's
Yeah,
all I
it just
said.
reeked of scam.
Yeah, it just sounds like a Ponzi or scam.
Well, so the
Have
argument
you got
that-
the video?
I mean, I can find it.
The argument I remember people saying at the time that caught up a lot of people was, how is this different than MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin? Because he was buying Bitcoin. Like, how is this different than a company buying Bitcoin? Because he bought billions of dollars of Bitcoin at the time.
Yeah, look, if he wants to buy a bunch of Bitcoin, fine. Look,
Look, no, I agree. The whole thing reeked of scam, but I'm saying the argument wasn't even the stable coin or the shit coin. It was there was a lot of Bitcoiners that otherwise consider themselves Bitcoin maximalists that were suggesting that it was exactly the same as a MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin. And I remember because I was having these conversations and I was like, do not, I don't know who, I was advising someone who was thinking about making content about Luna. And they were making the argument that it was similar to MicroStrategy. I was like, no, dude, it's a fucking shitcoin scam. And they dodged a bullet on that one, but it caught a lot of people. A lot of people got caught up in that. There's probably so many receipts out there.
yeah, and listen, during the bull run, I got caught up in the excitement. I thought Tesla buying loads of Bitcoin was exciting. I thought MicroStrategy.
All caps tweets about it.
Yeah, but like one thing I've
Caps
realized.
Odell.
One thing I've realized is that I think the biggest hodlers are the people with the smallest amount of Bitcoin. You got a small amount. There's no point selling it. Sorry, the smallest holders are the hardest hodlers, right? I think outside of Michael Saylor, I think anyone with a big density of Bitcoin, if something goes wrong, they're going to maybe have to sell that Bitcoin. The funniest and saddest thing about that guy, he sold all that Bitcoin to defend the price, and it made no difference. He might as well have not sold the Bitcoin. He
Yeah, but we
wasted
don't
that
know
Bitcoin.
if he sold it all.
I mean,
He probably kept a bunch of it.
maybe.
He said he sold it all.
I mean, wasn't it tracked?
I don't think so. I don't think we ever have receipts on that.
Well, the Bitcoin price
But
was
maybe
dumping.
we did. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, the Bitcoin price was dumping at the time, and like had a lot. Did you find it?
No, it's not there. I can't find it.
But
Has he
because
got
it
it-
never happened.
No, I did. Have you got it? Like, where did you go on Twitter? Because I think I put it as a tweet.
Oh, did you? No, I saw it on. I was looking on YouTube.
Yeah, if you go onto my Twitter and you do
We
the
bel-
advanced search.
We believe you, Peter.
No,
It happened. I was there.
Well, we believe Danny. Okay.
I'll be interested to see
He'll
what I
find
say
it.
though.
But the point is, the Bitcoin wasn't actually backing it. Like he was saying he was buying, I think Luna with it, and then Luna was backing. But it was the same thing that we ended up seeing with FTX, which is this like leveraged Ponzi over this centrally held shitcoin, and then as sell pressure goes, you just can't defend it, and it's just cascading liquidations all the way down. Absolutely. And the thing that was really, and this is one of the risks that we've talked about in stablecoins in general, is that I understand that there's a value that people want dollars in countries where dollars are hard to get. And they're willing to take risks and trade-offs for that. But I don't think they understand the risks that they're taking. I don't think they're properly educated on the trade-offs they're making. And every stablecoin is ultimately, or any kind of token that's backed by a real world physical asset, whether that's dollars or gold or oil or whatever, requires a centralized trusted third party that is essentially managing the whole system. And you have to trust them that they are actually going to keep that peg real, and you're able to actually use that for goods and services and not blacklist you and not rug you. And that's what we saw. So the problem is yes, they can maintain a peg to $1 on any given day, but also on any given day, they can just go to zero and they could be completely worthless to you. And we saw that happen with Terra, his stablecoin. And one of the things that was really sad to hear is I was talking to some buddies in Argentina, and the Argentinians love stablecoins because they're going through hyperinflation. It's really hard to get dollars. And a lot of them moved from Tether because of the Tether FUD to the quote unquote decentralized stablecoin that was Terra, and they all got rugged. Yeah. They all got absolutely crushed. But to me, the bright side of that is, it's not a bright side, but my optimistic take is that people will go through these learning experiences and a lot of people will get burned. And that becomes better education than all the podcasts, YouTube videos, books combined, is actually education by touching the stove. And as a result, a lot of them most likely now understand what the value prop of Bitcoin is. Yes, it's a free market. Yes, the purchasing power could go down 70%. But ultimately, you're not trusting any entity with custody of your wealth. You're able to hold that yourself. It's a native bearer token that can't be rugged like that.
This is pretty much the first time I'd heard of it.
Does that mean that their stablecoin is no longer fully backed?
Well, so this is the whole thing: is them specifically, but then we can talk about all stablecoins. They're not claiming that it's fully backed. They're not saying, "Hey, we're going to back 1-to-1." What they're actually doing is they're only backing about 30-40% of it. And over time, as Bitcoin over a long period of time, it ends up being over collateralized.
See, this is where it sounds super sketchy. They're basically saying, give us some money and we'll give you a printed coin in return and we'll kind of gamble away that money how we want.
So this is part of the risk, sketchy. Right? This is where people end up saying it.
Yeah. I mean, it was the first time I heard about it. I just thought it sounded sketchy. It's sketchy as fuck. I never really paid much attention afterwards. Because I have,
I can't believe it grew so big. And
if I was going to use a stable coin, it would be Tether, or it would be maybe even Circle. Like USDC. Is that USDC? Yeah. Because
we'll see.
I mean,
I wouldn't be, all these stable coins are going to fail eventually.
But if I was going to use one, I would want the most centralized corporate registered stable coin there is.
Yeah, but I mean, USDC has a different problem, right? Which is that as soon as Tornado Cash got sanctioned, any USDC that had touched Tornado Cash all got blacklisted at the same time, and you just got completely rugged in that regard.
Didn't matter how many hops.
I don't think it really mattered. Huh. And they said you could apply and submit your license or whatever to get it. Of
course.
And I assume people in the developing world aren't able to go through that process.
Possibly not.
But yeah, so you have that risk. Then Tether is like a shadow bank, basically. So you don't really they do blacklist sometimes, but even with Tornado Cash, they delayed their blacklisting. They made the government basically reach out to them and specifically ask to do it. So there was a delay period there. But yeah, because Tether is essentially a shadow bank, the U.S. government financial juggernaut is, regulatory juggernaut has had its crosshairs on Tether for years, and it's been impressive that they've survived this long.
Yeah.
But those crosshairs remain.
But I mean, those crosshairs are important because I don't think somebody should be arrested for writing code. But if you've written code which the North Korean government is using to mix the coins and use them, you're in the crosshairs. You're taking a risk. I don't think they should be arrested, but would I do that?
Wait, rephrase that?
So what I'm saying is I don't think a developer should be arrested for writing code.
Right.
I don't think you should. I think that is a constitutionally protected thing in the US. I feel like it should be.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you've created something which is heavily used by the North Korean government, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the specific stats of Tornado Cash, but my understanding is it's, the volume that was indicated that was North Koreans was rather minimal over the total volume.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it's another thing. Like,
But I think that's tangential anyway. The point here is 2022 to me there was a lot of pain for a lot of people. But as a result, what we saw was basically learning experience after learning experience because people were getting burned, right? So with the Canadian truckers, we saw the importance of censorship resistance, the importance of privacy, financial privacy, digital privacy. With the Luna collapse, we saw the importance of a native bearer token that doesn't have a centralized third party, the inherent risks of stablecoins. Like that is the largest stablecoin, so-called stablecoin we've ever seen blow up. It was quite large at the time.
Yeah.
All the other ones that have blown up in the past were relatively small.
But that caused
More will happen. More of that will happen until people realize that Bitcoin is the only long-term stablecoin.
But the other thing from the Luna situation exposed all the problems across all the different funds that blew up and all the different lending services, because that started a chain reaction.
Right. They
Because-
all had the same counterparties.
Well, yeah. So like 3AC were heavily exposed to Luna, as I understand. Is that correct, Danny?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And so they blew up. When they blew up, they couldn't pay back their debts to whoever, whether it's Genesis,
Right.
BlockFi, Void.
DCG.
Yeah.
DCG was exposed to 3 Arrows and exposed to Luna. FTX, there's some talk that FTX blew up Luna in the first place, and Alameda blew it. That's what 3 Arrows guys are claiming, and that wouldn't surprise me. But that also hurt Alameda, who was also a counterparty of DCG. And Celsius is in the mix there. The thing is everyone was pretending that they were only lending Bitcoin they were only lending money to very respectable
Institutions.
and counterparties. But what was happening was those counterparties were then going and just being absolute degens. They were doing the most reckless trading schemes and staking schemes and yield farming schemes, and they were essentially laundering that risk away from the big guys who were just pretending that they were only using, responsible counterparties. But at the end of the day, it was like, 4 or 5 major players that were all just borrowing against each other and lending to each other, and they just created this whole fucking mess. They created this whole mess that inevitably blew up.
I think you missed a part of it as well, in that they said they were only lending to responsible institutions, but they also were claiming that they were fully collateralized or over collateralized loans, and we knew that wasn't true, or some of the collateral was some fucking shitcoin.
Right. Garbage collateral.
Like FTT, or people were taking out massive loans collateralized by miners, but when the price dropped, the miner
Right,
value
the
dropped.
whole mining industry was dominated by ASIC collateralized loans,
Yeah.
and the ASICs, they lose value, significantly in downturns when you need to call them, and they're not easy to run necessarily, right? So you can't just immediately seize a bunch of ASICs and run them. So that was definitely a massive, and this is the
leverage.
first cycle where we've really seen that kind of leverage. But if you start to wonder, like, essentially what happened here is so much leverage was in the system. And there was so much Bitcoin rehypothecation where the same Bitcoin was being lent over and over again, that you have this result of just like immense paper Bitcoin markets. And part of the reason why this past bull market was as soft as it was and it peaked where it peaked is probably because a lot of that demand was absorbed by essentially these paper Bitcoin markets. And it's something that people have speculated on for a while, that people expected to happen. And the thesis has always been that those people get blown up. Self-custody Bitcoin increases. We're at an all-time high self-custody Bitcoin right now. We've never had more people hold actual Bitcoin and not IOUs anytime in human history. And then we have a solid base where you start to find the real market price again, rather than the bullshit that was happening. But at the end of the day, like, people are just greedy. People are always want more.
The surprise in it, though, for me, Matt, I think I was discussing with somebody yesterday, is that someone like Barry is a good example, right? Barry Silbert, whatever you think of him, he's made a lot of money, built some successful companies, depending on your measure of success, but like in terms of revenue, and he's built successful companies. And then he's for some unknown reason, as somebody who's I've assumed or has been noted as a billionaire, perhaps multi-billionaire, has literally gone into this bull market and gone, I'm going to put it all on red. Or, yeah, essentially gambled because said, let's just take these massive risks. Let's do this. And I'm like wondering what the mentality is. Is it like, 2 billion is not enough, I want 10 billion. But like
You didn't stay humble.
But it takes such massive risks, not only to get wrecked, but like there's people who are risking serious jail time. Like Matt, I've taken some risks in my life, right?
Yeah.
You know, financial risks, career risks, but I've not really taken risks where I've gone like, I've not been like, hey, Danny, like if we do this with the podcast, we can 10x our money. We get it wrong, we might end up in jail. Like we haven't taken those kind of stupid risks. And I don't understand why you would risk, when you're already a billionaire, do something where you risk reputation, death, financially wrecked, and jail. Like, what the fuck's going on in your mind?
When are we airing this episode?
The 11th.
The 11th? What is today? The 7th? So 4 days. When this airs, it'll be 56 days from when Barry Silbert stopped withdrawals at Genesis. And he still has not paid Gemini users $900 million, Gemini earned users $900 million, and owes over $1 billion in addition to that to other counterparties that we know of.
Is that a daily tweet now?
More or less, yeah. No one else is really talking about it, so I keep calling it out. And also because Barry should know better, and Barry should do the responsible thing and clean up the mess he had instead of stalling for time and trying to fuck over as many people as possible to save his own ass.
What do you think his strategy is here?
Stall. The thing is, the question you brought up is, why would he be so risky now, this bull market? Why would he play all these leveraged, ridiculously reckless games? I mean, I think it came out that they did a loan where they were paid in that Terra stablecoin because they were going to like market make on the Terra stablecoin or some shit like that. And they took, I think it was like over $1 billion that they took in that horrible stablecoin that ended up collapsing.
But Genesis were respected and had.
But my point is, where I was going with this is, I think he was always taking ridiculous leveraged bets and risks, but they increased over time. He got more and more greedy. They increased over time. They increased in scale. He started doing this GBTC trade where it was essentially increasing the assets under management for GBTC, which was this cash cow that he was collecting 2% management fees on the entire assets under management. And he was basically facilitating loans so that people could try and arbitrage the spread between, because at that time, GBTC was trading significantly higher than Bitcoin. Now it's trading significantly lower. And he got very greedy on that play, including holding a lot of GBTC themselves. Both as collateral for loans and on their balance sheet. So they became very dominant on that one trade as well, which increased risk furthermore and is very similar to the Luna collapse and the FTT collapse, where they have their own essentially centralized shitcoin that's spiraling down in value and they can't get out of it. But the point I was trying to make is he's probably been taking these risks all this time. We saw him attack Bitcoin with SegWit 2x back in 2017 and failed, where he thought there could be a proper corporate takeover of Bitcoin, because his money was circulating through the space like crazy. He had investments in so many Bitcoin companies, including buying out CoinDesk and basically using it as his own kind of mouthpiece at the time. And so he was taking increasingly risky bets, but he never banked on the fact that cheap, easy external capital would evaporate, that the Fed would start raising rates, and that he wouldn't be able to borrow himself out of a hole, or that he wouldn't be able to at least raise equity out of a hole, right? And we saw that because he was still in denial. Remember when the first stories started coming out, DCG is trying to raise $1 billion in probably the worst macro climate to raise any kind of money at the time. And you just saw it and you're like, that is straight desperation. And also, they're completely out of their fucking mind. They just don't even realize the severity of the situation they're in. And they ultimately couldn't raise that money. And I bet you at this point right now, he still probably thinks, oh, I can borrow money out of this hole. Oh, I can raise money out of this hole. Maybe Bitcoin will turn around if I stall long enough. Maybe the Fed will pivot if I stall long enough. And it's that mentality of cheap money. Like DCG is like a movie set. It's like the cheap money allowed it to have this veneer of legitimacy and this massive juggernaut, but behind the whole scenes was just a house of cards holding the whole thing up.
And you believe he can clean it up?
I think so. SBF can go fuck himself. He was essentially running a massive Ponzi scheme and scammed a ton of investors, a ton of users, a ton of people, just a huge amount of people. But one thing that happened with SBF and FTX is that he declared bankruptcy right away, right? He said, I fucked up, we fucked up, whatever, declared bankruptcy right away.
I'm pretty sure he said he regretted declaring bankruptcy as quickly as he did.
Because every good scammer knows that you extend it for as long as possible and you try and wiggle your way out of it as much as possible, right? And that is what Barry's doing right now. If Barry 55 days ago, trying to think of what day we're on right now when we're airing, if Barry 55 days ago was like, we fucked up, and he even in his press releases, he's like, ordinary market behavior. Like ordinary market behavior isn't commingling DCG and your subsidiaries with interconnected loans, right? That's just straight up reckless behavior. If he had took responsibility for it at that time.
I think it's potentially more than just reckless behavior.
Yeah, it could be just straight up fraud.
Yeah.
And they're being investigated right now for it. Instead of taking responsibility for it there, right, and being like, we're insolvent and, let's figure it out to the best of our abilities, he's trying to extend it longer and longer, and it'll be more painful for everyone involved as a result, I think. It's very rare, that FTX situation where, billions of dollars were withdrawn and then he just declared bankruptcy, that's very rare. Usually what you see is just this long extended period where denial, try and wriggle yourself out.
So we think they owe 1.9 billion.
I think it might be more than that, right?
Don't know.
Dan, you want to look it up? I think it's like 2 something.
Okay. Say it's 2.5 billion.
Sure.
And DCG, what we don't know with Genesis, what assets they do have still. They still have a trading business that they're carrying on.
I think it's about 2 billion.
About 2 billion.
Yeah.
They still got the trading business. I think they put out a press release recently saying Genesis Trading is operational.
Right. It's still, my understanding is completely operational.
So
right
that's an asset that could be sold.
at Genesis.
Yeah, that's an asset that could be sold. So someone could buy that trading business. Genesis. My assumption is Genesis has something. They have some assets.
Well, so DCG, the parent company,
Yeah.
I believe owes Genesis 1.6 billion.
Right.
So when we're talking about who Genesis owes, it's really DCG that owes them.
Okay.
Right? And it's important to realize that the most profitable subsidiary of DCG is Grayscale. And Grayscale is the provider of the GBTC exchange traded product and all the different shitcoin ones he has, right? He
Yeah.
has Ethereum, ETH Classic. There's a bunch of them.
So they could all be sold as well.
Those are the golden goose. It's the only thing of value really that DCG has. And so everything he's doing to try and extend it is to basically still be able to, have those management fees that are coming out of GBTC and the other trusts, but it's mostly GBTC.
Do we know the size of those management fees? You say it's 2%.
But the crazy thing is it's 2% of the total assets under management.
Do we know what do you know what the NAV is?
So he's collecting 2% on all of that. So he doesn't want it to get wound up, right? Or sold.
10.5 billion.
So 2% of that's 200. That's basically 200 million
A year.
a year. So someone would buy that.
I think it's even, if you add the other trusts, I think someone said 500.
Yeah, that's GBTC alone. So
Yeah.
Yeah, but Bitcoin's got to be the majority of that.
I believe
Ethereum
so,
one
yeah.
will be quite big as well, I imagine. They'll make a lot of money.
I mean, so whatever. It might be something that's worth $1 billion. Might be something that's worth $1.5 billion. Someone might want to buy that. Okay, you can go. Okay, you can take that. You can return the loan to Genesis. You can sell. Genesis
He also has a
Trading.
bunch of GBTC that he could sell.
There may be enough assets in the total thing to get close to clearing the Genesis debts, which means people get their assets back. Sadly, he loses his entire company stack. So,
Right, but he doesn't, he's not trying to make sure that happens.
but what we're saying is there's all these little,
That's the point.
there's all these little people over here and a few big people who are waiting for their money back. He might have the assets to do that, but he's choosing not to do that. So to protect himself, he's essentially fucking all these people here.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's the fucked up part. And that's why I tweet about it all the time.
Yeah.
And he should have known better.
Of course. I wonder what pressure will come on him. I mean, we've just seen the New York AG.
Well, supposedly they're trying to get like SBF to flip on him too.
Okay.
That's what I heard.
I mean,
And Caroline and Gary Wang,
yeah.
the FTX trio.
I mean, look, it's not fair on all these people. That's what we know. Like, there's a bunch of people I know because I've obviously received emails from people,
Right.
Telling me the situation they're in and yada yada. I'm sure you've had it as well. And that'll be people that might be their entire or a large part of their Bitcoin net worth.
They're GBTC. Yeah.
Yeah. But the pressure might come on him because we see Mashinsky's now being sued by the New York AG.
So as the operator of Grayscale GBTC, they could redeem the GBTC at full value. Now, the normal process for them doing that would be to sell it all for dollars and then distribute the dollars. Now, if they did that, you would imagine there's going to be some kind of price drop and haircut on that. So, like, as soon as that announcement comes out, before they even sell, Bitcoin price will tank.
I mean,
So they will take a haircut on that.
Absorbing 10 billion.
Like what? It's like 600,000 Bitcoin, right, or something like that.
I mean, is there enough liquidity in the market? To
Oh, there's
absorb all that?
100% enough liquidity, but we'll just.
And presumably they do it over like a matter of months rather than.
But it'd be the news would price it in, right? Or the news would knock the price down. And so they would take a haircut in that situation. Now, there is something called a Reg M redemption, where they would apply to the SEC and say, for the sake of our shareholders, let them withdraw in kind, and then everyone would receive equivalent amount of Bitcoin.
Which would make the GBTC trade quite good right now.
Because you would go from like whatever, it's like negative 90%.
No, it's negative 47%.
Because a lot of them are probably betting on that, right? Negative 47%. And then so you'd get double,
Yeah.
right? Wow, it should be lower than that. That's crazy. But Barry would lose his golden goose. So he hasn't done that. Like he could right in the beginning, he could have filed this a year ago when the discount once it flipped, right? Because it went from premium and he was basically pushing everyone into this crowded trade of arbitraging the premium, and then it just flipped negative and never recovered. It just kept going down, 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 lower, lower. But he just loves that 2%. So
It was a 90% premium at one time.
That's crazy. So some people, it's not just minus 47 for them because they probably bought at the premium, the higher premium, and it flipped on them.
Is that 6-month delay? What is that about? Why does that exist?
It has something to do with, financial regulations.
I think
about
it's
what-
SEC rules.
It's like what is class. It's not an ETF, right? It's like a holding company or something like that. So there's no mechanism for the opposite side. You can only buy more shares. You can deposit Bitcoin to buy more to create more shares.
Yeah. Well, we just have to wait and see. I
So
mean,
that's why like a lot of people say like, oh, it's the SEC's fault for like not having an ETF.
yeah.
But I would say this is squarely on Barry and his team. Like they
This
should
is the
have
reason we
known
don't
there
have
wasn't
an
going to be an ETF. What?
This is the reason we don't have an ETF because of all the fuckery.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we just have to wait and see what he does or what he's forced to do.
Yeah.
We've missed a step. We haven't talked about BlockFi. We should,
Yes.
because they were one of my sponsors. Also blew up.
Yeah. They blew up in the Luna collapse.
No, they blew up in the FTX collapse.
Well, they first blew up in the Luna collapse, and then FTX came in to quote unquote save them.
Yeah, but at that time they had multiple offers on the table. That's one of the sad things about their one is they had multiple offers on the table, and they took the FTX one, which
But
turned,
they were already not solvent at that point. They needed to be rescued.
yeah, I mean,
Which is why they took like a ridiculous deal from FTX too, right?
yeah, I mean, look, they had, but what I'm saying is they had multiple deals on the table. It turns out in hindsight they just took the worst one, because I think if they'd have taken, say, the Morgan Creek deal, they'd probably still be operational now.
There's got to be a level of responsibility taken here. I think it's a cop out to blame it on FTX. they made reckless bets in the first place with customer money. BlockFi was often marketed in a way that was I think predatory in terms of convincing people to deposit their Bitcoin and their other coins into BlockFi, when that money was then just immediately getting lent out to essentially degen traders doing the most reckless trading strategies possible. And BlockFi often claimed that they were only using, responsible counterparties that were taking realistic risks. And I think a lot of it is a product of what we were talking about earlier, which is this idea of growth at all costs, cheap money. We can always raise again. We can always borrow money. We don't need to have a profitable business. They were losing money. They never made money. And we don't need to have a profitable business, and we can just keep raising and we'll figure out the profit later, and just keep hoovering up more and more people's Bitcoin. And that caught a lot of people got absolutely wrecked on that. So just to show, this, I hear often this couldn't have been avoided. It was out of BlockFi's control. No one would have known this massive Luna collapse would happen. No one would know that Celsius would go down and 3 hours would go down. All these counterparties would go down. But meanwhile, while BlockFi was raising record valuation after record valuation, more and more money, you had Unchained Capital sitting there, refusing to do customer yield products, only doing Bitcoin collateral-backed loans, which was one subset of BlockFi's business, not their more popular part of their business. Not rehypothecating those loans. All those loans were over-collateralized, in multi-sig, completely clear on chain that it wasn't being lent out, highly liquid collateral that can be sold if Bitcoin started to fall, and did everything in the most responsible Bitcoin-focused way possible. And keep in mind that if being a Bitcoin-only company isn't just ideological, they built their whole business on native Bitcoin multi-sig properties. If you're trying to do Tether-backed loans and USDC-backed loans and yield products and all this stuff, it's hard for you to also manage a native Bitcoin multi-sig product. But they stuck to basic fundamentals, long-term good risk management, and their valuations were tiny in comparison to BlockFi. And all the investors were telling them, obviously 1031 was not, but a lot of their investors were telling them, add shitcoins, add the yield product. Everyone has the yield product. Customers love it. Throw a credit card on top of it. Give them back rewards, give them all this stuff. And they said, no, 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 no. Meanwhile, BlockFi lost their users' money. They are now bankrupt. And Unchained is there, and they never had any of those issues, right? Unchained operated on over 100% reserves, all provable on-chain and independent multisigs held by each user, and they did not have that issue, but the market didn't properly value that at the time, and they were giving BlockFi 10x multiples, if not higher, than they were giving Unchained.
I think it also goes back to that kind of conversation we're having regarding Coin Corner and the speed at which you grow.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I think whatever you think of BlockFi, those first couple of years, it was small growth. It was 16 people in an office. It was then 30 people. And they were growing fast. They got a lot of new customers. I don't have an issue with credit card products. I think they're useful. I mean, I need one. I use one. I don't know if you do. I think when they got to their last round, the valuation was so high. It's how do you justify that? Because I think the next step after that's probably IPO, right? How do you get to that next stage? The market isn't big enough, so you got to make those loans, and that's when they were making the loans that weren't, as they said, it wasn't perhaps institutions or responsible institutions, and it wasn't over-collateralized loans. It wasn't the things that people perhaps believed it was.
Here's the thing:
and bear in mind, they're a sponsor of mine. I worked with them for 4 years. I had no idea this was going on. There was no evidence of this.
Yeah, but there was a lot of us that saw the writing on the wall very early on the BlockFi's risk management scheme and how they built their business, and rightfully sounded alarms way, way, way before this stuff happened. I think there's a couple of things here to unpack. First of all, I think there is a responsibility for people that have corporate sponsors to hold those sponsors as critical as possibly, more critical than other companies, and to ultimately put their audience first and their users first, right? I think that is ultimately at the core. I think a lot of people have learned that this cycle, unfortunately, the hard way. But I think there is a responsibility there, and I take that responsibility very seriously. The second part is incentives, right? And we talk about incentives a lot in Bitcoin. Broken incentives are at the core of almost everything that's wrong with our society, all different elements of broken incentives. And this yield concept, this idea of quote unquote yield, of earning interest on your Bitcoin or your shitcoins, or the opposite of loaning against your Bitcoin, has this perverse incentive where if you're searching for interest to receive, you want the highest rate possible. And as a result, the services that trade with, lend money out to the most risky counterparties get the highest interest rates, right? Because the more risky your loan, the higher interest rate that demands, and you're able to pass that on to your user, cut a portion for your margin for yourself, right? So you're naturally inclined to seek the most risky loans. And then on the opposite side, when it comes to Bitcoin collateralized loans, the user wants the lowest possible interest rate, right? And you're able to offer the lowest possible interest rate if you take their money and then go lend it out to the riskiest fucking people. So as a result, you saw on Unchained, people would go and they'd be like, why would I borrow money from Unchained when their interest rate is significantly higher than a BlockFi or a Celsius or an XO? And it was because they're not lending out your Bitcoin. Your Bitcoin's just sitting there in a multi-sig and not being rehypothecated and lent it out. So obviously you're going to have to pay a higher interest rate than the companies that are doing the opposite. So we saw two broken incentives there that, when taken to their extreme, results in catastrophic failure and all this money, all these users losing money.
I do take my position responsibly.
I appreciate you bringing up BlockFi.
Well, no, listen, look, I'm not going to hide it from it. As somebody who had them previously as a sponsor, it's not an easy thing to go through, knowing that you've advertised the product, you've sold a sponsorship, people have used it because they've listened to your advert, and currently they have no access to their Bitcoin or part of their Bitcoin. I have to read the emails that come in where people explain their current situation.
BlockFi was one of the first sponsors of Rabbit Hole Recap.
I did not know that.
And in 2019, when they added the yield product, we cut them as a sponsor. We could have made a lot more money if we kept them, but we cut them as a sponsor.
Yeah, look, I wouldn't have a sponsor on the show if I didn't believe the product would be successful, the business could be successful. I wouldn't do that. We do turn down sponsors, despite what people believe. We turn down a lot of sponsors. I had a quite close and direct relationship with the people who run the company. I could phone them up and say, listen, I've heard this, or come on the show, explain it. People are concerned. I also spoke to the people investing money into them. People who invested tens of millions. Like, tell me about this. Like, there's lots of information from a lot of different directions. You get information coming from hardened Bitcoiners like, no, you shouldn't be doing this. You get other information from people put in tens of millions and they say, no, it's fine. It's this. Like, it's hard. It's a hard thing to take, but like, we've reflected on this a lot. We think about this a lot. Yep. It's rough to see people lose their Bitcoin.
But you take some personal responsibility for that?
I mean, I'm part responsible if somebody listens to my ad, but I don't run the company day to day. I'm not there running the company. You get advice from multiple.
I don't expect perfection in assessing risks. I know I'm not perfect, right? What bothers me is when people just don't take responsibility for missing it, for publicly apologize, those kind of things. And I'm not like, I didn't come on your show to do a witch hunt or whatever. I can be self-reflective as well. We had Compass as a sponsor for 3 months for Rabbit Hole Recap. Compass Mining. They they told a great vision. I had some alarm bells that were ringing when we started to do it, but I was like, this vision makes sense. It's no KYC. It's Bitcoin only, right? And we started to see issues that were happening. And I straight up told people we fucked up. And that it is one of the biggest regrets that I've ever had in my life was taking on Compass as a sponsor, even though it was only for those 3 months in time. And what pisses me off the most about the DCG situation and is Barry saying, oh, well, no one could have seen it coming. It wasn't my fault. What pisses me off the most about the FTX situation is SBF is like, oh, like if I hadn't declared bankruptcy, like you'd all have been paid out by now. Like it wasn't my fault. Like it was unexpected, right? Like I couldn't have seen it coming. What pisses me off the most about the BlockFi situation is that Zach, who I've known for a long time, refused to take any responsibility. It was FTX's fault. We should have never made the FTX. You were already insolvent from your bad decisions that you had made and had never made a profit up until that point, and had shotgun KYC'd users and done all this other stuff when you took the FTX money to begin with in a desperate move to save the company that you had built in the first place. And then when the whole thing collapses, like I think it's fantastic that people are having children and stronger families are happening and we're, seeing new Bitcoiners born in the world. But to have his paternity autoresponder on while his company is fucking bankrupt and withdrawals are frozen and people are being told that if they don't pay their credit card bills of $300, they're gonna send them to a debt collector, and meanwhile they can't even get the rewards on their credit card to withdraw because they're not there, they don't even fucking exist, is just fucking insane. And like this movement is supposed to be one of personal responsibility, and this idea that people just are like, oh, I couldn't have seen it coming, it wasn't my fault, is the most infuriating thing, because you just witness it happen. If you're in the space for any period of time, you just witness it happen over and over and over again.
Yeah, but I'm going to say I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
Like I held Bitcoin and BlockFi up until the day I ended the sponsorship. Up until that day ended, I had Bitcoin in them.
But you didn't have Bitcoin in when it collapsed.
No, because the sponsorship ended.
Yeah.
When they had the difficulty with Luna, and they said, well, look, we've done the deal with FTX. They'd moved on, and I gave Zach a call and made a decision. It's like probably time to move on. He was okay with it. I was okay with it, and I moved out of it. It wasn't like I wasn't running away from them. I had no inside information. I thought the deal was good for them. I had no idea.
But you agree you made a mistake having them as a sponsor? Do you regret having them as a sponsor?
That's a different question.
Do you regret having them as a sponsor?
Yes, I regret, but
okay. So do you think you made a mistake having them as a sponsor?
No, because I couldn't foresee it. They're two different things, and I think it's really important to get this right. Why do you think I regret? The only reason I have a regret is people I don't know, whether they listen to my podcast or not. But I regret that people who listen to my podcast used a product and then lost their Bitcoin. That's why I regret it. But that's why I can regret it. But if I think I was making a mistake, I wouldn't do it. I don't look at something and go, that's a mistake, but I'm going to make it anyway.
You could realize you made mistakes after the fact.
But I didn't have that. You have the information afterwards, right? So it's like a weird thing. It's hindsight. Okay, I made the mistake because I made the mistake because I didn't know, I couldn't see something in the future. But I think you make a mistake if you have the information and you do it. Like I think if I knew that they were fucked, if Zach gives me a call and says, look, Pete, we're fucked. And I'm like, okay, well, look, carrying a sponsorship, we'll try and get you some new customers. I've made a mistake there because I've known.
I mean, you've committed fraud in that situation.
Well, no, if he's like, look, the business is, no, I don't think that's fraud. He's saying, look, the business is in trouble. We're trying to turn it around.
We're insolvent.
That's different if he's insolvent. But what I'm saying is if you know the information, if you've got the information, or you've got the doubts, I had zero doubts about the company, zero doubts. So how can it be a mistake? Because I thought it was the right thing to do.
So you had after they were insolvent from Luna, you had zero.
No. But that's at the point the sponsorship ended, right?
Right.
Yeah, I'm saying up until that point, I had the only things I knew they had a bad GBTC trade, and they had the SEC fine, which I disagree with, by the way. But like,
Well, I disagree with the SEC fine.
yeah, but
I just don't think, whatever, securities laws, it doesn't matter. They're not really there to protect people.
But if I had information that I thought was a risk, then it's a mistake. It's like what information do you trust? You've got all this different information coming in.
Just accept some responsibility.
I'm accepting. I've told you I regret it. That's responsibility.
Dude, when you drop them, and I don't know if I'm just trying to get to the core of this. When you drop them, did you explain to your audience why you dropped them, that you had concerns about them, or did you just like quietly drop it?
I just moved to another sponsor.
Do you think do you wish in hindsight that you had, an episode explaining concerns over BlockFi, because you obviously had concerns at that point, right?
Yeah, but look, if you're going to ask me this, I've got to give you full information. I didn't just end the relationship because of concerns over them. It's not that. If I'd have had concerns over them, I would express them. I'd have said to Danny, when the Luna situation happened, they did the deal with FTX. Money was tight for them, and they'd come to me and they said, "Listen, like we've got a new deal. We're fine. We're liquid. The money's going to be tight. What can we do in the sponsorship?" And I just at the time said, "Well, why don't we just end the sponsorship? I'll move to somebody else. You don't need it. You've been with me for years." Like I thought it was a good deal for them.
Interesting.
Yeah, if it had been a situation where I was like, yeah, look, we're fucked, and I'd been concerned about them, then I would have, felt some obligation to come out and tell people, but I had no concerns.
Do you think that sponsors of the podcast have a rosier image of them in the content you produce by inherently being sponsors? Is there a lack of critical discussion on sponsors because on the podcast, like in the internal content of the podcast?
We don't really, it depends, because we're not that kind of show. Like you make the kind of show where you're looking right at sponsors and you're discussing their operations, and we don't do that often. If you go back and look at the history of our shows, most of the stuff we're talking about, governance or macro, like we very rarely talk about companies. We do in a scenario like this, end of year review, this is the shit that's happened, let's talk about it. Something blows up, let's talk about it.
Right.
But we don't really make shows like that.
Well, the reason I bring it up is just because I feel like that's where the responsibility stems from, right? It's not just that they're an advertiser, right? It's this idea that the critical discussion that people expect to hear of these different companies doesn't happen because of a financial relationship in the first place.
Yeah, no,
and
it's
that's
not
where the
that.
responsibility lies. And we saw it with Compass. Like Compass literally, there was employees from Compass. There was internal discussions as well, but there was employees from Compass that actively were talking publicly about how nobody should sponsor Rabbit Hole Recap because this is not how you should treat sponsors. And my answer to them was very clear. You don't buy my fucking opinion. You're a sponsor of the show. You support the show and the production of the show. But at the end of the day, like if we're talking critical of you, we're talking critical of you because you're fucking up your product and you're fucking over your users. Why don't you clean up your act? And then that won't happen, right?
Yeah.
Take some responsibility for that. And it's very common in this space, and we see it. And I'm not trying to single out you. There are many, many content creators in this space, event planners in this space that give rosier coverage to sponsors. And then when the sponsor rugs all of their audience, they say, no one could have seen it coming. It wasn't my responsibility. But meanwhile, there's plenty of us that didn't do that, right? That realized that risk was not worth that risk to our audience, right? And there's plenty of us that did that. So obviously there was another option.
Yeah, but like what I'm saying is, you've said, do I regret it? Yes. Of course I regret it. I've admitted that. You've asked me, have I made a mistake with the information I had?
I mean, you obviously made a mistake having BlockFi as a sponsor because there was a ton of audience members a ton of your audience listened to it and then ended up in BlockFi.
Yeah, I mean, so now you get into this, the situation where it's like anyone who's selling advertising is responsible for every advertiser that advertises with them. And that's just like a tricky position to be in because we don't have access to all the information.
I think in a specific industry that is as small as Bitcoin, it gets more, like, I think it's at the core of the advertising. And we've had debates on your show about advertising model versus value for value. But I think, that is one of the core darknesses of the advertising model. But in Bitcoin specifically, it gets way, way, way more insidious, it feels like. Because, like, if Delta was your sponsor and, there was a bunch of Delta plane crashes or something, I wouldn't, consider you as responsible for that.
I don't think it's a good analogy.
No, but I would.
I'll give you a better one. Tesla, say there's concerns about Tesla's autopilot, and Tesla are a sponsor of mine, and then 2 Teslas, like the autopilot fails and the cars crash. Am I responsible?
Okay. And my point there is this is a show about Bitcoin where people are educating themselves on Bitcoin. So when you interact with Bitcoin companies and adjacent, right? When you interact with those companies, there is a stronger level of responsibility that happens in the due diligence process, in what discussions happen on your show, in the kind of, sphere of Bitcoin knowledge, right? Like that is, obviously what Bitcoin did is expanding more, not just Bitcoin. There's tangential topics that are being discussed as well, but at the core, it's a Bitcoin show, learning about Bitcoin, and you have Bitcoin sponsors. And as a result, there needs to be, I think, a higher level of due diligence and a higher level of responsibility with those kind of companies.
But how do you know what level of due diligence we have?
Well,
but the only way the due diligence would have found that out is to give me access to information they would never have given me because they were doing things that were sketchy. So, how do I get that level of due diligence? And so, look, I get it. I get what you're saying, and don't think it doesn't weigh heavily on me. It does. Like every one of those emails that comes in, it fucking weighs heavily on me. Really does. Like, it's shit to read, right? And I do struggle with it. I wrestle with it. I mean, Dan, you talk to Danny, talk afterwards. Like, we've talked about this a lot. It's a hard thing to deal with, especially when someone like you or John Carvalho said to me a long time and said, like, BlockFi is sketchy. Like, you need to be careful here, or you shouldn't be having them. We go away and we think about that. And then I take advice from other places like, no, the company's in a great position. The company's got this many customers, they're growing. I don't know. But I don't ever make a decision where I think, do you know what? Fuck the listener. I'll take a gamble here. It's okay. We're getting paid. I never do that. I never would.
Okay. I think we're talking in circles a little bit, but...
Yeah, a little bit. But I
said my piece.
We take this forward. We consider the future of what we're doing, and we're like, okay, maybe we need to have less reliance on sponsors. Like, maybe the model needs to be different. Maybe it does need to be value for value or subscriptions. Maybe we need to get away from having that reliance on sponsorship. Like, that is weighing on us. It might be like, do you know what, Danny? The next 2 years are going to be tight because we need to change the model of what we're doing because there is too much risk here. That weighs on us.
Yeah, because you have that option available to you. It's obviously not a financially prudent option. It's a more difficult path to take.
Yeah, and it's like, but we have to consider that, like the sponsorship option.
Because you have a responsibility.
Yeah, we have a responsibility, and like our listeners have got burned on, I can think of 2-3 sponsors.
Yep.
That they've got burned.
Which ones?
Dropbit was the first one.
Yeah.
Who was to know in the background the guy running that company historically had made all his Bitcoin running a mixer?
But it was a custodial Lightning wallet.
Yeah, but like there were others. Blue Wallet's a custodial Lightning wallet.
Well,
People
the only
that.
people that got rugged were the people that were using custodial Lightning wallet. The on-chain self-custody didn't get rugged.
Yeah, but like there are other custodial wallets that people are using.
Right.
Like I use Blue, and I think Blue's great.
Do not use Blue. It's a custodial wallet. You're going to get rugged.
Yeah, but I'm saying I use it for me. I hardly think I spent some money from my Blue Wallet at Thingy today, Bitcoin Park.
There you go.
Yeah, that's the first one. BlockFi we've talked about. and that weighs on me a lot.
And keep in mind to the listeners, Blue Wallet's only custodial on the Lightning side, not the
Yeah.
on-chain. Okay. BlockFi,
And
Dropbit,
and Compass. Compass was a difficult
Compass.
one. Yeah.
and then Gemini.
I mean, we have never promoted the Earn product, never been involved in it. You know, we promote the exchange.
Right. But that was the insidious part about Gemini Earn was like people were getting like emails and stuff saying like, oh, like you're keeping money with Gemini, like why don't you get another 7% or
I mean, look, that's that's whatever their marketing is. But like again, Compass was another tricky one because, you know, at first I thought it was great, but we also have contracts. Like you might not have these. It might be a situation that's not what you do, but like every one of our sponsors, we have contracts.
yeah, we have contracts.
Okay, and the contracts have certain things about terms and things, and you know reasons to end a contract and whatever. And you know, on the Compass one, that one got about tricky about 6 months in, right?
I don't know when you started your
Yeah.
sponsorship.
I mean, they haven't sponsored us for a while now.
Yeah, it would have been something like that.
It was like a year and a half ago.
when we had Wit
Yeah.
on the show in the UK.
Yeah. You know, again, like when they got into the difficult position they were in, we spoke to the people who run them or invest in them. Like, what's going on here? Like, is this turning around? Can you fix this? And again, that was inside information we didn't know about. But like, you know, we could go around and around with these sponsors. Like, I think anyone listening is going to know there has, like, some of my sponsors have had some situations. And there's going to be people listening going, go on, Matt, well done, call Pete out. And they're going to enjoy this, right?
Right.
They're going to enjoy that you're putting pressure on me, and they're going to enjoy, they can say, look, Pete Squareman or whatever. I know people are going to enjoy this, and I could have easily not made this show, or I could have veered the conversation elsewhere. But like, we are like listening. You know, this is an experience we've gone through as well. It isn't fun. It sucks. And it's like, okay, you know, when, I mean, we've seen Pomp's announced he's going away from sponsors.
Because all the sponsors went bankrupt.
Maybe he can still get more sponsors.
Yeah.
You know, we still believe we make a really good show that's been really good for Bitcoin. We work super hard for it. You know, we spend time away from our families. We come out, we work hard. And, you know, none of us do this with any intent. Like, there's no intention of us or carelessness of us to think, you know, fuck people. Like,
Well, if I thought that was the case, I wouldn't.
yeah, but like we do work really fucking hard on this, you know, and when we make money, we support projects. This week, we've sent money to Bitcoin Policy Institute and Tor. We've made donations to those guys helping them projects. We supported Peter Todd with his open timestamps. We sponsored that. Yeah, there's loads of things that we do. We are conscientious Bitcoiners. We just maybe just, I don't know, maybe we just, I don't know what the best, I say we, and it's not really fair to say we because it's I make these decisions. Yeah, I bounce them off that, but I make these decisions. So maybe it's just taken me a bit longer to like realize some of this, which usually it does with most things anyway. It took me 4 years to learn an XPub.
Yeah, I mean, people can go back to the value for value episode we had together.
Yeah, but
I know what episode that was.
that model's never going to work in the short
So
term.
then how do you avoid, what's your plan going forward to not have audience members get rugged by your sponsors?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's multiple angles to that. Like, you know, you've got to look at the companies themselves. Like, we make this show is made as a remote show, right? Sorry, an in-person show because we want the high quality. Like,
Right. It's way better in person.
Yeah, it's way better in
That's
person.
why I have the podcast studio at Bitcoin Park.
and the production quality is better, and we want people coming into Bitcoin to like, you know, find a show that maybe fits alongside nicely some of the other shows they work in terms of production.
Right.
Right. And we also try and make a show that is apolitical as possible. It's hard not to show your biases, but like speaks to a broad spectrum of people and brings out all the different ideas. Like we want to do that, but it's an expensive thing to make. It costs $120,000 a month to make this show, right? If we can't make that without sponsors, well, what are the options? We could do a subscription model. People could, you know, on Patreon. Can the show bring in 1.4 million a year through subscribers? Possibly. Or maybe it's a hybrid mix. That's possibly the mix. And if we can't make that work, well, we conserved capital from last year. If the runway's there, we see the runway and we think, okay, maybe it'll do that, then great, we'll carry on. And if it doesn't, it's like, okay, we tried, it failed, we'll be a remote show. We'll cut back, and that's the way it is.
Well, I mean, I think there's a middle ground that is convenient to ignore, which is be more selective with who you choose. And as a result, you take a hit on the revenue side. But then
Yeah, but like that's under the assumptions of what I've said. It's like, if we can't rely on sponsors, like the show brought in enough on sponsors to cover that, right? What we're saying is, if they now can't do that, if one, the sponsors aren't there because it's a tight market, or two, we have to be even more selective about who we work with, or we just want to get away from sponsors eventually, we have to find a new model. I don't think value for value is going to provide that for what we do for years. So the only other options is, you go into other things, you do events and stuff, but we're not events, we make podcasts. So I think, it's an active conversation. We will try some things over this year and see what happens. See where we get with it.
okay, but there is a there is a middle ground. I agree that value for value is early. Obviously, I built Citadel Dispatch as a purely value for value show with no sponsors or ads, no paywalls, no subscriptions. The content's available freely. Pay what you pay what value you think it provides to you, right? Dispatch is one of the most popular podcasting 2.0 apps, podcasting 2.0 shows. And still, I've noticed that the support is increasing, that we see across the board the amount of shows that are getting supported and the level they're getting supported. I've seen your show up on the charts sometimes, has been increasing. But it is a fraction of the revenue that comes in on a rabbit hole recap. It's a hybrid model. It's ad supported plus value for value where people can contribute. Like a incredible fraction of the rabbit hole recap revenue. But at the same time, rabbit hole recap's been going on for 4.5 years. And besides the 3 months of Compass, we have been able to avoid situations with outright, audience harm. And throughout that whole process, we were also critical of our sponsors, and we held them to a higher standard than other companies. And and we were very transparent when we dropped Compass in the lead up to dropping Compass. We were very transparent about why we were doing it, the risks to do it, and very outspoken about people trying to get out of that kind of situation as best as they possibly could. And that's the core of this whole discussion, which is, if you are going to run an ad model, and I see this also not just with Rabbit Hole Recap, we see this building out Bitcoin Park. Bitcoin Park has incredible burn. You saw it. It's very expensive to maintain that thing, right? And part of our strategy is, yes, member-supported initiative, but the memberships only get us so far. Especially in the beginning, we need solid company supporters, Bitcoin company supporters, and adjacent stuff like real estate brokerage or something, right? That wants, or like there's a mining insurance company for the mining summit. But the point is that we are leaving a lot of so-called money on the table by making sure that the supporters we do choose are supporters that we feel 100% certain in, right? Like you have to make and I don't think I'm like telling you, like, this is not you learning this for the first time. I think you're aware of this.
But it's an active conversation we're having now.
Right, which is where the responsibility comes in.
Yeah.
With who your partners are and why you have to hold them to a higher standard.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm telling you, like, we're there.
Okay.
We're there, Matt. Like,
okay.
This isn't like a thing where we've just gone through it and said, whatever, like, what are we going to get next? Who are we going to replace it with? We're like, okay, how do we get away from the inherent risks that come with sponsors? Like, I think there are good sponsors out there. There are companies I would work with or want to work with. But, like, if me and Danny said, look, if it has to go back to being a remote show, we stop all the travel, then fine. But I live in Bedford, United Kingdom. I don't live in Nashville. I don't live in Austin. I don't have 20 Bitcoiners that are great to interview live near me who come in all the time. I live in Bedford, England. Barely people come to London. So if we have to do it, it would be a remote show. Me and my lounge in my kitchen recording back like it used to be during COVID. And then we rebuild it like that. I accept that. I would like it to stay as an in-person show. I think the quality of what we produce is important and good. And so we're trying to figure out that model. Like we've gone through that burning exercise. Like how do we, and I think it is a hybrid. But we are working on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking in circles. I think yeah, I mean, I think it's good that you feel there's a responsibility to make sure you pick solid partners.
I've always felt that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's not again, like I'll take the zingers on the chin. Like I'll take the negatives. I've also, you know, I think it's also to like weigh in other things that people don't recognize or bring in. I think the whole thing sometimes, you know.
Look, I completely.
I'm not just like some piece of shit who just takes people's money and goes, "Oh, great, give me your money." Fuck that sponsor, fuck my listeners. Like I take this role in Bitcoin responsibly, and I've had to take a lot of.
If I thought that was the case, I wouldn't keep coming on your show.
I know, but like
right?
I've had to like take a lot of personal stress. I ended up in hospital during my
Right, I
lawsuit.
remember that.
Yeah, I ended up in hospital. Like I've taken abuse and shit for years, like relentless shit. I've taken people trying to cancel me. I've taken false accusations. Like I take as much abuse. I probably take more abuse than most people in Bitcoin, right?
But you've self-admitted that some of that abuse, like you like fanning the flames.
That's an old thing that I said like 4 years ago. Like people bring that up. I don't fan the flames now. Any opinion I give out is an honest opinion. And I think a lot of people like the fact that I don't sit in this tight little box of like Bitcoin opinions. Like I am given like we have created a movement for progressive Bitcoiners this year. We've done that.
Right.
We've introduced all these people. And by the way, that's the most important thing for conservative Bitcoiners because they have that defense that it doesn't become partisan. And like we've done that. Like we constantly working hard, but like people just want to go, "Oh, where are the dunks? Where are the dunks?"
I'm well aware of what happens when you're a public figure and people are very critical of everything you're doing out in the open. Happens to me as well, right? Makes a lot. People quickly forget the good things. They always look back at the bad things. That is not the point I'm trying to make. And I think it is irrelevant to this situation, which is there is a responsibility on who the partners are. Anyone who worked with those partners is partially responsible. The ethical and moral thing to do for your audience is to admit fault to a degree in that situation. That's all I'm saying. Nobody's perfect. Admit the mistakes. Move forward better. That's the ideal situation. And there will always be haters no matter what, and people will always forget the good things. Well aware of that. See it firsthand every day. It's just frustrating as someone who has been a public figure in this space for probably way too long, that's tried to do things the good way, and you just see it just repeat over and over and over again, and then just people just brush it under the rug. They just completely brush it under the rug.
Well, we're not brushing under the rug here because we're talking about it, and I could easily have avoided it.
Yeah.
We're not brushing under the rug.
I appreciate that.
No, I want to have this conversation. Look, and if people are listening, commenting and like giving shit, like fair, you know, it's that kind of response that you learn for. Like we read the comments, you know, we listen to the feedback, we listen to what listeners say, and that's always an important part to listen to what the listeners say as well. But like, I'm not therefore then going to just take on a sponsor because I think, they're going to fuck people. They might rug them. Like I didn't see there was an issue.
Okay.
Okay.
What month are we in?
I think how long are we in, Daddy?
2 hours and 15 minutes.
Have we really done that long? Jesus Christ. I don't think this was a year in review.
No, I mean, we got to like March or something.
Well, we covered a lot of stuff. I don't think this was a year of review. I never thought it was going to be. I think this was going to be what we just discussed now. And that was what I know you wanted to do it.
I mean, we've had this, like, yeah, it's an important conversation.
Yeah.
Got to own your mistakes. All of us do.
Yeah. 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 Well, listen, look, from this, we will
Well, I mean, look, people can go back to our past episodes. I've talked about it on my shows a lot too. My optimistic take, just to brighten the mood here a little bit in this room, even though we have these massive lights. My optimistic take has always been almost like a doomer optimistic take, which is just, there's just going to be a lot of times where people are going to touch the stove, they're going to learn very expensive lessons, and then they improve from it. So this year has just been one massive carnage-fueled educational experience where a lot of people have learned lessons that will stay with them for the rest of their life, that they realize the importance of self-custody Bitcoin, of holding your own keys, of not trusting these custodial services, of being careful who sponsors are, of realizing that there's, the people that in a bull market look like the smartest people in the room are usually the biggest degens and taking the most risk, and that's why they look good in those situations. I mean, I remember not too long ago, people treated the 3 Hours Capital guys like they were gods, right? They treated Barry Silbert like he was a god. They treated SBF like he was a god. They treated all the investors that were valuing BlockFi at $4 billion as gods, right?
Now they treat you like a god.
They're all fucking wrecked. That is not the point. I have made many mistakes. I have fucked up many times. I'm very conscious of that. And it's important to be conscious of that because hypocrisy rules everything around us. And we're all a little bit of hypocrites, and it's important to try and be the least amount of a hypocrite as possible. But the point is that there's all these things happened. A lot of people got hurt. A lot of people lost money. A lot of people will continue to lose money as this DCG stuff unwinds. I mean, I promise you that the Winklevoss twins massively regret ever working with Genesis and launching that earn product.
Of course.
And they realize that now, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people will, lose money on that. But hopefully, we'll have a whole new set of people that understand the fundamentals, that understand proper risk management, that stay humble over the next couple of cycles, that start to care about digital privacy, that start to care about, supporting open source tools and learning how to use them. Like this happens over time, and it unfortunately seems like it can only really happen as people lose. Because there's tweets out there where, I'm telling people to withdraw money from BlockFi a year and a half ago, and people underneath are like, nope, that was like the Mount Gox area. Like Bitcoin has matured past that. Like that will never happen again. Like it's not going to happen. Like, Matt, you're so heartless. Like I need this 6% interest to feed my family. I swear, there's tweets that say that, and those people now realize what I was saying, right? They realize the risk. They realize why they were getting paid a percentage in the first place was because they were taking an insane amount of risk to get paid that percentage.
Maybe you're right.
And we live and learn from that.
Yeah, maybe you're right in that I can think of one mistake I made this year that I'm not proud of, right? When the Celsius files came out, and there was somebody in there called John Carvalho. And John had been giving me a hard time on some bullshit as well. But I saw this John Carvalho thing, and I was like, and I called it out. And that's a mistake, right? Because I jumped to a conclusion and I attacked somebody. And I had to go back. I had to go back and apologize, John. And do you know what? In fairness to him, he was fucking decent about it.
He found the real John Carvalho.
I ended
got rugged on Celsius.
I know. I ended up sending him money as well because I felt so sorry for him. And also because of just the guilt of John, I felt bad. I was like, right, well, I helped this guy out. But I apologized to John. He could have been a total dick to me, and he wasn't. And then I saw him in Amsterdam, and he was cool, and he's kind of forgotten about it. I'm sure he hasn't forgotten about it, but he was good about it. And that was a mistake. That was a genuine, okay, I fucked up here. Because, like you say, we all do. And then if you think in that context, what was the mistake? Well, maybe I hadn't done enough to realize, what I was about to do. Yeah, some in that same context, maybe you're right. Maybe they are mistakes. Maybe you're right. I need to think about this one. It'll probably all come out my intro.
Well, I appreciate it.
No,
I appreciate you coming around, Peter.
No, look, it
takes a lot.
They're tough, man. Owning situations or owning mistakes or realize it's really
Can
hard.
we just cut the tape right where he says you're right and just fade to black?
No,
we
look,
do
it's,
that?
look, it's hard. Like owning mistakes are hard. When you don't think you've done something wrong and then like something bad happens, when you think you're a conscientious person, something bad happens, like it's hard to come back from that and like figure it out. I'm just gonna need some time to like work it through and think it through, but you're probably right. Yeah, Matt's right. Leave it with me. Let me have a think about that one. And yeah, okay. All right. Matt Odell, thank you for our annual 10MP off.
This was a very productive conversation.
Yeah, I think it was.
It was a little bit solemn, but that's the kind of year it was.
Yeah. I mean, look, sometimes you've had to accept that I'm right, that like a lot of this Bitcoin stuff's too hard, too difficult to use. And sometimes I have to accept you're right about.
Did you name a bar at the stadium in Bedford,
It's called the X Pub.
the X Pub?
Yeah.
There you go. But you know X Pubs now. You figured it out.
I've known what X Pubs are a lot longer than I've admitted. Sometimes it's helpful to.
Exactly. Fan the flames.
No, that's not fanning the flames. I'm not fan. No, it's just like. I think there's some people who don't realize how far away they are in their depth of knowledge to other people, and
No,
how
I
far
appreciate
we've proven
that.
to do. And like I've taken that on the chin a few times, but I that's one area I stood by. Like,
No, I appreciate. I mean, that is something that I've been.
I think that's a blind spot of yours.
No bullshit.
Yeah.
I'm innately conscious of that, and a lot of the work that I do offline and online is focused on an education point of view of trying to make education accessible to people. So I see the pain points firsthand. We see it at Bitcoin Park. We run workshops there. I've worked with activists, ranchers, NFL players, teaching them how to use Bitcoin, seen all these different perspectives and, roadblocks where they get confused. And there's definitely a big disconnect between like the Bitcoin diehard community, especially in the dev side, and the actual average user using things. Like, I mean, I had Sergey from Bitrefill on Citadel Dispatch, and we were talking about the average user of Bitrefill versus the average Bitcoin Twitter person, right? And there's a massive disconnect there. People can go check the tapes. I mean, that was the XPub one specifically was our really drunk Zoom one that was a little bit brutal, and you might not want to listen to it because time is scarce.
Brutal.
But my concern there
Brutal
was
white.
my issue was that I think as an educator you have more responsibility to understand those things, and so like forget the COVID mask requirement on planes. I realize this metaphor like broke a little bit because of the COVID response, but when you're on a plane and those oxygen masks come down from the plane, you're supposed to put yours on before you put the children's on, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you're doing an educational show, which I think what Bitcoin did is,
I disagree.
I think ultimately people listen to it to expand their knowledge and understanding of things, which means it's an educational show. There is a greater burden on the host to try and understand and learn these things so that they can better serve their audience. And a perfect example, I think, recently is how many, and a lot of people thought I was talking about you when I was talking about this, but I know for a fact that you actually do know how to self-custody your own coins and self-custody your own coins. How many Bitcoin podcasters that have done hundreds of hours of education, thousands of hours of education, that weren't self-custodying their coins when FTX and all this shit blew up and never had done it before and never had done even the most basic kind of, learned the most basic kind of Bitcoin skills. And they just get up there and they pretend, they portray themselves as someone who is an educator, that's someone that's like, and maybe even an expert. Some of them will call themselves experts, right, on this matter, and they've never even educated themselves and learned the basic Bitcoin skills. And I think there's a responsibility there for those types of people to learn that before they go out and try and proclaim and recommend things to others.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a different answer. I think you misunderstood what I said by blind spot. I don't mean you don't understand what it is and go and educate people. I think your blind spot is the propensity for people to be able to learn it and retain that knowledge and use it in the future. The XPub thing, like, I have zero regrets. I reckon one of my big wins in Bitcoin is making XPubs publicly discussed to the level they have been. Absolutely publicly discussed. Like, it's a thing. It became a meme because of that. And that's a great thing. More people now know about XPubs because of me doing that. It was the same as I did with nodes. Like 2 years into running the podcast, I admit, I was like, yeah, by the way, I've never run a node. All these people lost their shit. Blah, blah, blah. Because of that, now more people run nodes because it became a topic. We made a show about running nodes. I've always said, like, my role in Bitcoin is not to be an expert, it's to represent the normie, okay? And I see the emails and the people come and talk to me and they're like, oh, you ask the questions I'm too scared to ask because I get damned for it. You're the shield in front of me for asking the simple questions. And I'm never going to change, Matt, ever on that. Never going to change. Because for me, Bitcoin, a lot of Bitcoin usage is like using Linux. Like, the only people who use Linux are people who, like, know computers. Everyone else wants shit done for them. And you might not like this, Matt. You might like it, but that's just the reality of the world. People want a Mac or they want an iPhone because they want the simplicity.
Okay, then don't be a Linux influencer.
No. But let me finish, because I'm right on this, okay? And they don't have the time in their evening to learn and program and code all this shit. They just want it easy. And
Not
you
the
might
point.
not like. No, it is the point. It is the point. Having the empathy for how difficult this is, like this, the difficulty some people have on the most basic.
I'm well
things.
aware of this.
Yeah. So I'm going to be that, like, if they're advanced and they're expert, they can go listen to Stefan Rivera because he's got them, right? And if they're privacy conscious, they're going to come and listen to you. If they're, like, nervous and they don't understand this stuff and, like, technical stuff worries them, I'm going to be the guy for them. And I'm never going to change from that. And I know the reason I'm not going to change is because I know it helps people. You might not like it, but I know it helps people. And the best thing for me is, like, afterwards they search for a Matt Odell video on YouTube and they learn to do something.
All right, well, the good thing is you've admitted that you knew what an XPub was. And that
Not
was
at the
just
time it
bullshit.
happened. Not at the time it happened. I didn't know what the
Okay.
fuck an XPub was.
Okay.
And, like, somebody sent me this long article. I was like, I don't get this shit. It just doesn't work for me. I'm a storyteller. I'm not a technical person.
Okay. Look, I mean, I'm extremely empathetic to the average person. I battle with that all the time. Like, it's one of the things that consumes the majority of my time is educating helping average people expand their skills and expand their knowledge and see all the questions they have and all this. So I'm well aware of that, and I think you do provide a service in that regard as an educational show, and it's important to take that responsibility seriously.
Fuck off. You know, having to. I mean, if my show is an educational show, all shows are educational shows. This is.
Yeah, I mean,
this
you're
is
either
this is-
entertainment or education, right?
I think
or
this is
like the two.
I think this is a.
Is it an
talk sh-
entertainment
It's
show?
a talk show.
It's an education show.
It's a talk show. It's not. I don't consider this an education show. I think this is a talk show. This is a show to make people think about different topics.
But good talk shows are education shows.
But I mean, most of them are. Like, it's a gray area between talk show and entertainment. We don't make shows about how to do UTXOs anymore.
You just went to a whole long thing about how you're empathetic to people that are trying to learn.
Yeah, I am.
Because it's education. But yeah, okay.
All right.
Look, but you understand my point. Like you understand the basics. You've learned the basics as you've gone through this space.
And this is where I think your empathy has a blind spot. You expect people can learn this stuff. There are things that I can't learn. I can read it and it can be explained to me, but I cannot learn to code. It's not possible for my brain to be able to do that work.
Yeah, but now you're just moving the.
No. But my point I'm trying to make is that, and an exercise we'll do after this, I'll get up an explanation of like what an XPub is, and then I'll talk you through when I'm reading it, what my brain's saying to me and where I'm struggling. It's like your blind spot is thinking everyone can just get this. Some people just cannot get it. It just isn't, they don't have the ability, or it's going to take so long, they're not going to do it. It's just, it doesn't work for them. And that is a blind spot. That's a blind spot a lot of people have. I could do the same. I could turn around to a lot of people in Bitcoin and go, do you not see what's wrong with your brand? Do you not see what's wrong with the color scheme on your website? No one's going to like listen to that or go and click on that. That like the branded shit. I see it like that. Like people have different brains and different skills. But I think my approach, one of the good things, I mean, Wasabi Wallet, basically, didn't they do the McCormack version?
Yeah.
You know, like I helped them understand mistakes that they were making in some of their design or some of their UX.
To everyone listening right now, if you open your favorite podcasting app, search Citadel Dispatch and go to episode 43, that's the Bitcoin for Beginners episode, you can do it.
Not everyone can.
You can do it.
All right, I'm telling you, you sit down, you should I'll get you over to the UK, I'll sit you down with my dad and go on. And you'll experience somebody who cannot do technical things. Okay?
Citadel Dispatch, episode 43, you can do it.
Have a go. I hope you can do it. I'm not telling anyone not to do it. But the expectation you have of some people have of others is a blind spot.
Oh, I'm aware.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the UX challenges in Bitcoin. They're improving.
Have you ever bought furniture and got out the
Like the IKEA combination.
Yeah, and then you get out the instructions. You're like, I can't fucking figure out how to put that together
Right.
from this, right? That is what like some of the explanations of stuff is in Bitcoin. XPub, it's your extended public key. It does this. It's derivation. Like it's like what the fuck? I'm reading a foreign language. Sometimes people just cannot get it from the explanations are given. It's a reality. Like,
Well, if anyone out there is listening and goes and does listen to that Citadel Dispatch
I hope they
episode
do.
43, definitely reach out and tell me, where you hit your roadblock and how I can improve there. You can find my contact information at mattodell.com.
I actually used one of your videos. Remember to
The Wasabi video?
no, it
The
was
cold card?
no, it was the green wallet. How I could sweep my
Open Dime.
Dime.
Yeah, that guide's at werunbtc.com.
Yeah, I
I
got
have a bunch of guides there.
there was something that got lost in that one though as well. I told you about it. Anyway, listen, look, we're going around in circles.
You could do it. You did it.
Eventually,
I've updated that guide. Green wallet changed how they set it up. So it uses blue wallet now. Different color.
Matt Odell, I look forward to sitting down with you again at some point this year, and I look forward to sitting down with you at the end of the year.
Likewise.
You know what? There's probably good we didn't drink because we'd have been fucking throwing
Thank you
shit
for
at each other.
having me.
Matt, you're always welcome to the show. I love
I've
you.
drank 2 tall boys of water. It's my most sober what Bitcoin did.
I know.
Like 2 bites of this fucking apple. Has this apple just been in frame this whole time?
The whole time.
the whole time. Matt, I love you.
Those are the only 2 bites of food I've ever taken on camera. It's just super
Really?
self-conscious. I don't like it.
Okay. Do I eat?
That's why there's
we
like
don't
a
eat on camera,
half-eaten
do we?
apple.
No.
But I haven't eaten lunch today.
You hungry? We got some steaks.
We were
in.
at Bitcoin Park. We hosted that event. Then I did dispatch. And I drove 20 minutes out of the way. And then I came 20 minutes back.
Have you? Well, that was your fault. Have you got to go?
And then I ate 2 bites of apple.
Answer my
on
question.
air.
Have you got to go now?
Yeah, let's wrap.
I mean, have you got to leave though? Because if you're hungry, we bought you a steak. We can.
We
knock
have
that out.
steaks?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
Danny cooks a mean steak.
I could eat a steak. I can always eat a steak.
All right, go check out Bitcoin Park. Go check out Citadel Dispatch. Go and check out
Dispatch.
I'm sounding like I am pissed. Go and check out Citadel Dispatch. We'll put everything in the show notes. Show notes. I can't fucking talk.
Right, just wrap.
Yeah, wrap. We're done. See you later. Love you, Matt. Ciao.
Cheers.